In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Genius Brain Podcast. Well, we have our returning guest, Ed 2, of course. The man, the myth, the legend himself came out of hiding once again.
Yes, I did.
You know what I just realized as I'm looking into the screen? I got the craziest fucking t-shirt tan I've ever seen in my life. And that's going to be the top comment.
Yeah.
So before we even talk about that, fuck you. And of course, we have a very special guest only because we have been on this theme of talking about specifically, I mean, you guys know what's going on in this country. And I come from a very, I wouldn't say poor background, but I would say poor. I would say a very poor background. And it wasn't really an inner city. It was still like in a relative like suburb, but it was like kind of borderlining that area where it was going to be either really poor or not too poor. So I kind of went into that nice little medium area of that. John, what's your last name?
Kwon.
John, of course. It's like the most simple.
As it rhymes.
Dr. John Kwon.
Oh, Dr. John. We have, for real.
Yeah.
We have Dr. John Kwon here. Ooh.
Yeah.
You are a vice principal of an inner city school or a charter school?
I was at a charter school, but right now I'm at an inner city school.
Okay. So you were, how long were you at the charter school for?
9 years.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. 5 years as an English teacher as a high school. 4 years as an assistant principal. And then last school year, I transitioned over to my new district.
Oh, what made you want to go into education in the first place? Because for me, originally, I wanted to be a teacher. And then I had a conversation with my dad. And then he said, oh, so you want to be poor? And then he just shut down my whole dream of becoming an educator. I mean, so what made you want to go into education specifically? And even then, you went into a charter school.
Yeah. To make a difference? No, that's not it. I got asked that question like in an interview once, and I gave that. And this was like earlier on in my career. And then afterwards, some dude who I met made kind of an impression. I was like, hey, we like you. We don't have a spot for you. We'll keep you on tabs, but don't ever give that fucking answer. Yeah. Everybody wants to make a difference, but just don't say that.
Just tell the truth. You need a job.
Not that money. No. Yeah. It started because in college, I didn't really have a clear idea of what I wanted to do, in terms of like my profession. And I reached out to my sister because I started off with a biz econ major, thinking I'll go into like finance or accounting, something stable.
Like every other Asian.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like you steer away from the lawyer, whatever, like doctor route, and so like, nah, I just want to make money. But I talked to my sister who was out in New York, and I was taking some finance classes, and I was telling her like, hey, Duna, like this is just beating me up. Like I have no motivation to study. I didn't have that much motivation to study anyway, but it was like compounding it and making it worse. And so I was asking her like, hey, does it get better like in the upper divs? Like, does it get more like interesting? It's just, no, it gets worse. If you can't do it right now, like I hate my life right now. So I recommend that you get out. So I was like, all right. So I got out and I was thinking like, okay, what can I switch to? And I always grew up loving reading. That's just something that like my mom and dad really instilled in me. Like my summer school daycare was my parents, just because they both worked, they would drop my sister and me off at the library. And it's like, all right, start at this end and just work your way down.
Yeah.
So I became an English major and I started liking philosophy. So minored in that. And I thought I'd, think through like, okay, what can I do? So I talked to like one of those guidance counselors, like, what are some careers that an English major can do? Because I kept hearing that English majors, you just become poor.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with it? Like, be a writer?
Yeah.
And he said, like the English major and philosophy would be helpful for law school. If that's something that you want to consider. So I actually interned, or not interned because it was paid, but it was like somewhat of a role between being an intern and a gopher, at a law firm, at a crim D firm. And it was pretty small, but I did that. And I started like one of my responsibilities were to listen to interviews and then transcribe them and then do some research and see like what are some like relevant cases with ed law. But I was reading some of these transcripts. I was like, yo, this dude is like clearly guilty. Mm-hmm. Why are we defending him? Or like, what's the case going to be built on? And I remember the lead lawyer or attorney at the time was like, we're not here to interpret like guilt or innocence. We're just interpreting the law for them. Whatever the case is, this person who may look guilty still deserves like a fair trial, due process, and should deserve like the best opportunity that he can get with the law that we interpret. And that just didn't sit well with me. My core values So I got, and like it just happened by chance. I got invited to go volunteer at a youth group, like summer camp, and it's something that I used to like participate in. But it was like an old mentor of mine, like a Hyung, was like, "Hey, like, what are you doing this summer? We need some extra hands. You want to come out?" And I was like, "No, it's not really my thing." I kind of like, moved away from the church. He's like, "No, you don't have to do like any prayer or spiritual stuff. We just need you like in the kitchen, like just hanging out, or, like eating some games."
Just cracking open eggs and peeling eggs. That's all we need you to do.
Yeah, and I was like, all right, I can do that. And it's like I could reconnect with some of like the old church homies. And I realized at that trip, and I think it was really transformative because I interacted with like youth in a way that just invigorated my soul, like it just energized me in a way that was like, I like this. What can I do more with this? I don't want to like be a priest. I don't want to like
I like kids so much. I want to be a priest.
I see how that sounds. But that
You just ruined his whole career.
just down the drain. That's when I got into like the opportunity of teaching. So I started volunteering at some schools, seeing if like this is something that I want to do. But it was really the kids who attracted me. Like there's something about it that was like authentic and honest that I didn't find like at a Crim D firm, especially. And it seemed fun. At that time, I didn't know how like shitty they got paid, but
Yeah.
that's how I started.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, what can you explain to people what exactly a charter school is? I live next to a charter school back in Sacramento, so I know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the
A
bad
charter
boys and
school-
girls.
A charter school, you're from Sacramento?
Yeah, Sacramento.
A charter school in a nutshell is a school that has opened up with a permission that was given a charter, like a contract by the local district to exist, because the charter school finds like some niche or an area where they feel like they can outperform the neighborhood school.
Yeah.
So whether that comes from instruction or providing some specific programming like fine arts,
Mhm.
or they provide like just a different experience. And it could happen because there's overcrowdedness in schools, but it could also happen just because an outside organization sees like an underperformance and says, "Hey, we think we can open up a school and actually outperform the local schools."
Oh wow. So are charter schools privately funded or is publicly funded?
Both. And there's like mixed models. Some charter schools have a lot more private funding. So they just have like grants and donors and different like foundations that help like support them. But there are some schools that exist just on the public dollar.
Oh. And then you went from the charter school into what you do now, which is
Yeah.
But charter schools tend to still be in inner cities.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, some charter schools have been opening up like in, predominantly affluent areas like Huntington Beach, or because they're providing like a niche program.
Okay.
Or maybe there's, a segment of that city that's not doing as well as everyone else in that city.
Yeah.
So they come in.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, like, just off the top of your head, the ratio would be then to like affluent neighborhoods to, more, I guess, poor socioeconomic areas?
Yeah, more for sure in underprivileged areas.
Yeah.
so is a charter school built around that area to give these kids like a leg up? Is that what it is?
In one sense, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's so interesting because like when it comes to like education, because for me, I didn't give a fuck about education. I could give two fucking shits less about it in high school. Like I wasn't as bad as this motherfucker, but it was hard for me to see value in it. Even if my parents harped it on me, right? Like since I was a lot younger, my parents like, you have to get into a college. You have to get into a college. It's important. It's important. It's important. But I think when I hung around certain peers that didn't give a fuck about an education, I didn't give a fuck either.
Yeah, and so that really would beg the question then, right? Like in like a poor socioeconomic area, how do you get kids to care about education when what's around them is not focused on education, right?
Exactly.
It might be like drug dealing, right? It might be gangbanging, right? So like in that sense, then how do you get kids to care, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's there's no, I mean, first of all, I don't have an answer to that question, right?
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in that field. And I would really question anyone who says, oh, this is the answer to get unmotivated kids motivated. I think for anyone, how do you motivate them is there was a lot of like research and theories built on it, but to actually apply it to different like specific groups, it's really hard to define. But I think when you ask a question of like, okay, we're in inner city schools, there may be an assumption that there's less motivated kids. And so how do you remotivate them? That question in itself may be biased, right?
Mm.
Because you're coming at it from like an assumed lens.
Right.
And then I think it's also problematic because then you just put the onus completely on the students and say, this is your responsibility to be more motivated, to be more successful, and, invested in your future. And I think if you polled anyone and say, hey, do you care about your future? Most of them would say yes. So even if the answer was no.
Fuck that.
Yeah. Like I live for the day only. It's rare. Even if someone vocalizes that, I just find it hard to believe. It just goes against our like self-preservation, So I think the better question then is, what is going on at that school that is unmotivating? Like, what is your educational experience right now that you devalue?
Or do they have enough funding, right?
Do you have enough funding? Like, okay, so what are you interested in?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to study more of, current events in your history class, but you're reading about old dead white guys,
right?
Or you want a better sports program, or you want, debate or speech, or you want better like extracurricular programs like dances and clubs, but there's just no room for it,
Yeah. Because I feel like the after school program aspect is the part that gets kids really into school, right? I think like after school programs, first of all, for poor kids, it's very, very important because they need a place to go.
Yeah, for sure.
Like a lot of people who are like in terrible like socioeconomic situations, there's no babysitter, there's no person waiting for them at home, right?
Yeah.
So to get them out of trouble is to give them an activity to do.
Right, you don't want them on the streets, on their free time, right? You want them involved in like a community that kind of cultivates positivity and learning, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a sports team or pursuing, I guess, like those extracurricular subjects, right? That aren't part of the regular curriculum, right?
Yeah.
Because Whitney had a lot of money, right?
I mean, I don't know exactly what. I've never looked at their books. It's publicly available.
It's a public school.
It's all available.
Yeah.
There's something called like the local control funding formula, and like their money's available. You could see their books and like their plans.
Because when it comes to funding, right, like it's so odd because when I compare my high school experience to other people's, right, and I hear the courses that they're taking in high school, I didn't have any of that shit. They're like, oh, like we're gonna like certain art programs that you could take as an elective class, right? Like we had like shop, like woodwork here and there.
See,
right?
we didn't have shop or woodwork.
Oh, do you guys did?
Yeah, we didn't have anything like that.
That and it's like some schools and districts still have it. So my current district has things like that, and it's categorized under CTE.
What's that?
So like career technical education.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So like different schools in our district may have had it, like Artesia, GAR, and so it's really a pathway where it's like, okay, I'm not headed maybe towards the traditional 4-year university, or even like a community college and then call a university, but I want to go straight into a trade school. So let me build the CTE skills like shop or woodwork, or I mean, there's other things now too that it taps into. There's like forensic science. I mean, there's things that go across like the STEM, whatever type of classes.
Yeah, because we had just this one dude named Jared. I remember him. Like he was in shop class all the fucking time, and lo and behold, he's a grease monkey now. You know what I mean? Like that's what he does for a living. I feel like a lot of students, they kind of knew their lane. Like they sucked at every fucking class. Like they were just dumb as shit.
Yeah.
But when it came to shop, this motherfucker could build anything, right? So I remember like he had like this old Toyota Tacoma, and the next thing you know, that shit looked like it was gonna like go over rocks and buildings and climb shit and trapeze over shit. I was like, how the fuck did he do this? But he just learned how to do that all
he
in
found
shop.
his lane. I mean, and luckily there was a lane for him to pursue. But like what you're saying is that sometimes that lane isn't there for the kids to actually even have a chance to pursue it, right?
Yeah.
And by the time that you're kind of reaching graduation age, it's already too late because you've already have like completely lost interest in education at that point.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the last time we were here, we were talking specifically because in your position, like you're a vice principal of a school, right? Because we were talking about the situation in Whitney, which was your alma mater as well, right? How there's a lot of like anti-Blackness in that school, right?
Yes, sir.
And we, reading a couple of these emails that these students were sending to me, it's very interesting how in that school specifically, both of them talk about not the students, but they also talk about the teachers and how they perpetuate that specific thing that, it bleeds into the students, right? So for my thing, like I always wonder, okay, number one, why is it not addressed? Number two, how does it get addressed? And number three, how does it become a big enough issue where it should stop, right? Because if the educators don't find it to be a problem and they're the one perpetuating that type of stuff, like who can step in to change that in that school? Because I didn't grow up with that. Like I always mention, I never grew up with that, and it never crossed my mind that that would be a huge issue. But when I see that in another school such as Whitney, which, lo and behold, when I was researching and I found out it's like a highly accredited school, and you would think that at a place in an education level that high, it wouldn't be a problem like that, especially in a school, quote unquote, though they're not Black, they are colored people, right? They're Asian. A majority of them are Asian. So where does administration's responsibility step in, and how does that change?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And what's funny is I saw something this morning. I haven't fully like read it or processed it, but there was like a petition request that came out in like that Facebook group, and in it someone or like a group of authors, they wrote like this manifesto, or like not a manifesto but requests on like how they can see change. And I thought the recommendations in there were pretty solid, and they were a really good starting point. So I skimmed through it. I mean, like I spent a total of maybe like 2 minutes on it. But some things that resonated with me was like, first of all, creating like a zero tolerance policy, right? And I think something that's related to that is, as educators, we are mandated reporters. What that means is, so like 2 quick examples is anything that's related to like sexual harassment, we have to report, otherwise we're held accountable and responsible. Like if a student comes to me and says, hey, like event A may have happened and I don't know how I feel about it, I say, hey, you know what, sometimes
It's cool.
like it just happens, like don't worry about it. If I
Yeah.
said something like that, I would lose my credential, or potentially lose my credential, or even be locked up.
Damn.
If it came out later on that,
Yeah.
hey, I reported it to him and he never did anything.
Oh, wow.
The same thing for neglect or abuse, and even if you observe something. So for example, if like a student just comes in with the same pair of jeans and it's tattered, or 2 weeks later I see like the same food stains, and something's gonna, just catch my attention. And it's like, hey, maybe like what's going on? Like, are those like your favorite pair of jeans? It's like, no, well, you know what? My mom hasn't been home in like a couple weeks, or my washer broke down and I actually, just, I don't know, like I'm getting hungry or whatever the case is. But if I hear these things, I have to report it to, to child services. But so going back to that, what's going on at Whitney, they brought up something called zero tolerance. And I don't think that's what they're exactly alluding to, but I think we're heading closer in that direction if we say we will not tolerate like racism, whether it's.
But is that something that like needs to be instated, like a zero? Shouldn't that be like as an educator? Shouldn't that already be a given and the fact that it has to be introduced as we're gonna have zero policy from now on sounds a little ridiculous, right?
It does, but then like if it's not written down or in policy, then there's nothing that really like governs.
I see.
So like fighting, and then this is like controversial, and I don't necessarily agree with like a zero tolerance for fighting, but just as an example of zero tolerance, fighting was introduced as that. So anytime it happened, then there was action. Whereas before it was like, well, was it really a fight? So there's some problematic areas that would have to be teased out, but I remember seeing that. I saw like really developing some cultural awareness. So having Black champions on campus who are adults, right? Like an advisor. We had like counselors or advisors.
Mama Logan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or having diversity, equity, like inclusion trainings for students. I mean for staff, but also creating curriculum for students. So I remember those things, and I think that's like really heading in the right direction, providing space for Black culture to be celebrated, to be recognized, not just when like issues come out, but consistently saying like, hey, this is a marginalized group. Let's elevate them. Let's demarginalize them, because we know what the dominant culture is.
Yeah.
Not only is it white, but at Whitney, it's yellow, it's Asian.
Pretty homogenous, right?
Yeah, it is homogenous. And so I could see how just raising awareness, saying, I mean, like the first steps of, I don't know if this is like part of AA or whatever it is, but of recognizing a problem is the first step. Verbalizing it and saying we want to do something about it from like decision makers is incredibly powerful. If it happens behind closed doors, and as an administrator, sometimes we have to deal with sensitive issues. And I'm talking about maybe like a parent who comes in who doesn't agree with like our policy. So for example, we had a lot of kids bringing in alcohol and hiding it in bottles. And just as a stopgap to stop it immediately, we said no outside drinks just for time being until we could strategize, because it was happening too much where we couldn't get ahead of it. And then some parents came in And
My kid wants to drink. What's the problem? It's like, what the fuck?
yeah,
Chills him out a little bit.
the area I work in right now, it gets hot,
Yeah.
And so parents will come in, it's like, hey, my kid's gonna get dehydrated, and he doesn't like the water that's like at the fountains. Is there a way you can make an exception? So we created some backdoor rules, like, okay, we'll create a list. If we get parent permission and you're monitoring what the student's bringing in, we'll allow it, But we didn't advertise that.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you put it on paper, people are going to hold you to
Right,
it.
right,
Everyone's going to,
Yeah.
my office would have been filled with
Yeah.
like hundreds of
You
students
just,
coming in.
You just get a workload, an added workload on top of everything else you got going on.
Yeah. So I think what they're doing is really cool because we kind of talked about it before, but these are our peers,
Yeah.
and these are like our mid 30-year-old, I want to say, students, but they're not. They're full grown adults who saw something and was like, I have an investment in Whitney and I'm going to do something. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is too, now some of these people are educators, some of these people are lawyers, right?
Yeah.
So they're kind of looking at it and well, obviously there's the personal attachment because that's a school that they actually went to, but then also hearing about it just from like objectively speaking, like what the hell is going on there, right? Like we need to do something because we have the power and the experience now to do it.
Yeah.
It's not something where you're just like, well, that sucks, but what can we do?
Yeah.
Right.
I think the sad thing is like for when I look at an institution like that, right? And it's sad for me because I always think now, and I'm only starting to believe this more and more now, is that it seems that punitive measures are the things that really motivates people, or maybe not so much more, but scares them. It fucking starts to scare them because a lot of people, like let's say even Whitney, like I don't know what the school is like, but I could see educators who are in that area that they don't want like the negative media to come in. They might do the lip service of saying, of course we'll get to it. So like for me, I would like to see if some in a school like that for them to think about hiring new educators who are of color that do understand this, right? Because you could go ahead and put somebody in that school and say, let's say for some like me, I become a teacher, right? And then I'm gonna teach these kids about like Black American studies. It's like it's not the same, and this is like secondhand information, So for in that type of case too, like you have educators, you could tell them like, hey, this is what you have to. They go, okay, but does it really change? Do they really care? Like for example, recently. Khalif has been trying to they have a group they're called like YBS, right? Like Young Black Scholars. And so they went to go ahead and donate money. And when they went there, he told me that they said that he goes, well, here's the money for YBS. And they were like, what's YBS? He's like, what do you mean? What's YBS? It's Young Black Scholars. They go, okay, well, let me go check to see what that is.
Yeah.
So for me, I see that. So it's a lot of lip service,
Right.
So because they could go ahead and tell the public, oh, we'll do better. But there's only about like 4 or 5 Black students. And it really depends on those young students to really speak up against it to see what's going to happen. But when they are the minority in a majority, how hard is it for these kids to speak up, right? So that's where there has to be, where I don't know what that solution is. It's like, it seems like it's going to be a cyclical issue where they constantly go, okay, we have this group called YBS, and the whole public goes, oh, Young Black Scholars, they got it done. But as it goes to show, when Khalif went over there, here's the money for YBS. What's that?
Yeah, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's like, so
Is that a
what's,
gang?
Exactly. So what's the next step? Do you have to get fucking flamed? Like, what are these people going to do?
Yeah, that is tricky too, right? Because like there are certain people in the administration who are accused of, having some racist comments or racist behavior. And so question is, do those people get replaced? Or do you give them a second chance with these new policies instated, like the zero tolerance policy, right? I mean, because if these people, because these are grown adults, right, whose worldviews are, I mean, I'm not going to say set in stone, but it's shaped pretty well at that point in their life.
Yeah.
And if they have these type of views and if they have these type of thoughts and they've acted on that to students, I mean, that shows a huge amount of negligence and irresponsibility to be in a position to educate the future, So, I mean, what's your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, I think they're valid. Firstly, what he was bringing up was about like how effective like punitive measures can be. And I think what you're also kind of bringing up, or like you guys are transitioning to, is like, well, you have these adults who don't know better, and they obviously didn't do better. So how are they going to be changed now when they're like, 20, 30 years into the game? And I think people can change. But I think if you kind of remove, I mean, with some crimes or offenses or behaviors, It's the consequence has to match that, right? The consequence has to match the crime. But I think when it comes to like, insensitive remarks, racist, like just stereotypes that you perpetuate, or literally just offensive marks and actions, I think if you separate that behavior from the person and say, hey, this is why it's offensive. This is why we can't say this. Here's another way to go about it. Here's the training. Here's the impact that it has. Here's the historical context why this is important to consider when you're teaching or when you're counseling or whatever the case is. Then I think if people have the opportunity to respond, and then if they don't, then I agree with you. I say remove them, find someone else.
Yeah.
Like diversify the staff, right? Or incentivize it. Maybe the area is so homogenous that only a certain type of educators are attracted to it. But I think there's ways to incentivize it with either pay or you get to start this program or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah. For example, like there was a letter that we read, and there was a couple letters that I read, and they were talking about certain teachers, pinpointing them out because they're the black student, and this is what they felt. I mean, obviously, this is facts based on what he or she said.
Yeah.
And
it's secondhand.
Exactly. And he said that a teacher called me autistic. Like what the fuck? And he was like, yo, like I did well in this class, but whenever I would speak up, I would raise my hand. I never ever got picked once throughout the whole year when I'm raising my hand to answer, or if I did get something right, there would be a backhanded remark like, oh, you got one right.
I guess you're not so autistic after.
What
the fuck,
look at Mr. Autism. Stepping up to the plate.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like these backhanded comments, and so it's like, where does that come into play? Like, if a student spoke up and said like, hey, this teacher did this, and this to me, like what happens then?
Yeah, I think if you start change, because change is just so daunting, but if you start small and they went back to the zero tolerance type of thing or whatever, I mean, I should stop saying zero tolerance. I have like a personal, opinion about zero tolerance.
Yeah.
But that's just, going back to that idea of really not tolerating and putting it down on paper and saying like, okay, teachers, like we are not going to tolerate this kind of behavior or words in the classroom. And students, we're going to empower you to hold your teachers accountable and to monitor that and report it if it happens. And so we're going to document this. And if we start noticing a pattern or a history of these behaviors, here are like the very clear next steps that's going to happen. You're going to be forced to do training. You're going to have to, figure out, do better or be let go. And I think if you start a process like that, you put it on paper, I think that's one way that change can start. And you can start building momentum along with the other things that we talked about.
Oh, so it looks like here, Mr. Johnson has the fifth report that he's being a bitch. I guess he needs to get some training on how to not be a bitch.
Do teachers go through like sensitivity training in terms of like different cultures and ethnicities? Do they have a mandatory type of training system for them in place?
I'd say, I mean, in my experience, which is still pretty narrow, and once again, I'm not an expert, I will say that it's not mandatory like sexual harassment training, right? But it varies across districts, across schools, even across, just states or whatever the case is, because there was this shift in education where it's like less top down, like being directed what to do, because there's like this creative element of teaching where you have to inspire and you have to turn something into your own to inspire others. And so they realized telling people what to do wasn't effective because first of all, it's just not going to get done, or sometimes has a converse effect where people being told what to do, they want to do otherwise. And so it's just,
this motherfucker right here,
right? Myself included. So you provide the training, high quality training, then people can take that and kind of like turn it into something that's their own. But to your original question, is that training provided like widely? I'd say no.
I think that's problematic too. I think that's something that should be standardized, right? Because we talk about this, man, like I had no idea. Obviously, I'm learning all this stuff as we go because of current events, but just how many hours cops are trained versus, and they did a comparison to how long a barber is trained, and a barber is trained like 4 times the amount in terms of hours they put in before they have to be allowed to cut people's hair on their own compared to a cop. So like these are the things that always concern me because I don't know this from my end. Right. So I just assume for some reason, I assume that, teachers go through sensitivity training because this is stuff that they should know. Right. Because I think that when we leave things up to assumption, that's when issues come into play. Right. Like I assume this teacher's not going to be racist. So I should let them know or say racial undertones. Right. For example, like you shouldn't say stuff like to a young black girl. It's like, hey, like, can I touch your hair? But to be honest with you, a lot of people don't know that. Like, for example, my fiance, I had to let her know, like when she first met Khalif, she's like, oh, can I touch your hair? And I was like, hey, that's a no-no. Right? And she goes, why?
Pump your brakes there.
Yeah, she was like, why? And it was very innocent. It wasn't like, nobody was angry. It was just more like I had to let her know. It's like, first of all, it's odd. It's like if somebody came up to you and it's like, let me run my fingers through your hair.
Yeah.
It's very odd. For you, it's something different, but because you're the norm, you don't see it that way.
Yeah.
Right. So those are the stuff that I feel like should be put into place, not because like they're so quote unquote racist or racially insensitive on purpose. It's because they don't know. It's ignorance.
Yeah, ignorance.
Right. For a culture that they don't understand, they wouldn't know. Right. It's like if somebody came into my house and they never met an Asian person and they walked in with their shoes, I'm not gonna sock them in the fucking face. I'll let them know,
You're
over
only
here.
gonna just drop an elbow.
I'll take them down and I'll fucking cut off their feet and leave it on the wall that way,
This podcast is brought to you by Thrive. If you want high quality, organic, and non-GMO foods delivered to your door, Thrive Market is the one for you. You're still going to the grocery store. Why waste your time? I know for a fact that you wander around aimlessly looking for the same stuff that for some reason is always in a different aisle every time you go. I know because that's not you, that's me. So get Thrive. I'm serious. Look, a couple of cool things about being a Thrive member. You will save 25 to 50% off traditional retail prices, and their shipping is free on orders over $49. I don't know about you, but when I go shopping, I definitely spend over $49 every time. So I love good deals and food that I can trust, and it just makes, markets very whatever. You could just walk in, get whatever you want. And not only do they have food, they have pet staples, cleaning products, and a whole bunch of other beauty products and more, just like any other market. So if you haven't done groceries delivered to your door, you are missing out. And Thrive, in my opinion, is one of the best to do it. It's convenient, great deals, and for me, it saves time, and that's the most important part for me. Try Thrive Market and become a member risk-free. Go to thrive.com/brain, join today, and you'll get up to $20 in shopping credit toward your first order. That's THRIVE market.com/brain to start your risk-free membership and get up to $20 toward your first order. That's thrivemarket.com/brain.
I think there's like a spectrum or like a gamut too, right? So you say like, okay, I'm not racist, but and maybe if someone says, well, I am racist, and then so I think there's a lot in between.
Yeah,
you could have had a racist thought, a racist action, or like a racist whatever instinct that came out just because of your experiences. And then once you learn to identify it, then it can be like, okay, well, you're a really cool and great person. That behavior of like just touching someone's hair, let's just cut that out of your behavior, and here's why. And you're still an awesome person, so continue being awesome. I think has a different effect.
Yeah,
than saying, hey, you're a racist for doing that, so knock it off.
Yeah.
Racist.
It's like, hey, how about you just not touch the student's hair? Huh?
Shut up, bitch.
Shout out to Jared Ewan. Huh? Shut up, bitch. You fucking trash bag.
Oh man.
Speaking about that though, so like, since you started as an educator, and now you're in a role of assistant principal, like when you were teaching and you're basically in an environment with a lot of minorities, right? How do you check your own like biases, right? And like how do you also hold yourself accountable from like maybe the things that you're seeing or the interactions that you have, like to prevent it from like reinforcing stereotypes, right? Like what's kind of your checks and balances when it comes to that, or was your checks and balances when it came to that?
Yeah, I'll say like this is my 10th year in education, and I'm still making the same mistakes that I did as year one. I still have my biases come out. I still make racist comments, or I still make someone feel less than because of the color of their skin or how they look. And that this happened as a teacher leader, as an administrator, and I'm sure it's probably going to continue happening. And I got to keep chopping away at it. It's never going away. But I think what was really cool was the training that I received in my previous place. They purposefully said, hey, this is a problem. We're putting it on paper. We're going to require and schedule these trainings from everyone in the district, top to bottom. Right. And here's what you're going to learn from it. And here's the impact that we're hoping to have. When it becomes clear like that, and you have an entire, organization that's serving, 10,000 plus students, I think it's like 12,000 now or like 11,000, whatever the case is, that has power, and I think that resonated when it would come back into like my immediate family or my threshold, my locus of, influence, which was my dinner table. Then it extended into like my homies. We'd have conversations, and sometimes it didn't end very well, but we still had them, which would have been different if I never had those trainings. And so like we had trainings that were mandated on, or mandatory, but it was really cool because it was on like identifying your implicit biases, understanding what it means to work with students of color, what it works with to work with people in underprivileged areas, what's culturally relevant pedagogy. And so that's like probably like, what the fuck is he talking about right now? But the traditional model of teaching is just a banking model. Like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Let me tell you, memorize it and just repeat it back to me. Right. But culturally relevant pedagogy is more of like, you are a part of this process. Join me. What do you need to learn? What are you like? So you get to know your students. Let's build a community, because research has shown people learn better and are more motivated when you're, with peers, when you feel a sense of belonging. Let's bring in more dialogue. Let's value your opinion, and let's move away from like rote memorization, like true or false, factual memorize like the 50 states. Be able to draw this map. Instead, let's look at like the differences between regions. Let's apply some higher order thinking skills like analysis and like evaluation. So I think there are things to do and like put into like really quality training that if you get enough people talking about and implementing it. And so this would also translate into the teachers. You're not like left on an island to do this by yourself. You work with your peers. You talk about, well, I'm really passionate about this area. I want to improve this, and I think that's where you can make some waves. One of my favorite trainings that I received was around, I forget the creator of it, but it came from this organization that focused around increasing equity and equity mindedness. And so I don't know if you're familiar with that term equity, but it's different from equality. So equal would be fairness, means everyone gets the same thing, right? Equity means everyone gets what they need to be successful, even if some people get less or more.
Right.
But it's different from like socialism. It's just understanding that there are differences, but let's honor those differences as we like move forward. And so what that looked like specifically was there was something called this threat training. And it's very like brain based, like neuroscience, where once a person feels threatened by something, their amygdala like sends out this chemical response. And so your brain has this response where it's like, okay,
fight or flight.
Exactly. Am I going to fight? Am I going to flight?
Yeah.
Or they say fight, flight,
or freeze,
or appease.
Yeah.
Right. And you can't control it. It's
or bust the dick out with ease.
And two, the comeback. No, and then
this man was being all serious, and he was like, I don't know what part of your amygdala.
I've known this cat since middle school. It's been like this from day one. That's why you're a sociopath.
My brain goes off on tangents, man.
You just hear that beat. You're constantly going to this beat.
Continue.
I don't even know what the fuck I was talking about, dude. I'm trying to think of your Ed 2 songs.
No.
Fuck.
So fight.
Yeah, it was my favorite.
So fight or flight.
Oh yeah, my favorite training was like how do you deal with these social experiences when you feel threatened? And part of the training was, let's just identify them. Let's label them, give them a name, and they give you some coping skills on what to do when these things come about. And some of those, it's called the SCARF model. So it's like, when you feel threatened, what is being threatened during this social interaction? Is it my, Jesus Christ, I forgot what the acronym means for a second. Hold on. There's autonomy, relatedness, fairness, certainty, and status. So I kind of went around, but status, certainty, and going so forth. Do I feel like my position in this like social hierarchy is being threatened? Like, you do not see me as an authoritative figure, or even when we're among peers, I get clowned on. Like my threat is, I feel like a bitch right now. I feel like a pussy. Or like with certainty, it's like, you know what you're saying right now is like really confusing. I don't know what's going on, and that's a threat. You are threatening who I am. And like, we're no longer like hunters and gatherers. We don't have like predators hurting us, but we have all these internal battles of like self-doubt and like insecurities.
Right.
And so like autonomy is like, don't tell me what to do. Like relatedness, like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like, you drink a different Kool-Aid, I don't care about you. We do not see eye to eye. Like fairness, it's like, you know what? That person got to do it, so I can do the same. Fuck you, because why are you calling me out? Call him out. And so these aren't like comprehensive, but they're just a way to put labels on things.
Yeah.
And then when I received that training, part of the exercise was like, and this was like over the span of years, right? It wasn't like a one-off training. It was like maybe 6 or 7 different sessions a year that we revisited. But I went back and thought through like, okay, professionally, where did I lose my cool? Because my amygdala response, going back to like my pops, you know, my upraising is I fight, right?
Yeah.
I get angry and I want to fight back. And during those times, it was always when either my autonomy was questioned or a lot of my relatedness. Like I have to connect with people. We have to see eye to eye, and don't tell me what the fuck to do.
Yeah.
But I still want to see eye to eye with you. You know? It's like those kind of things. And I started noticing a pattern or a trend. And, you know, it really changed the way I approach things.
Was that very necessary, specifically working in an inner city school? Just because inner city schools are fucking rough, dude.
Yeah.
Like they're fucking rough. And I feel like, you know, how hard is it to balance like an authoritative figure, but not so harsh where they look at you like the enemy, mixed in with like, you know, a little bit of that being cool and you know what I mean? That's so fucking hard.
Also the fact that he stands out just because of his skin color, right? So it's like almost having a double responsibility of you need to be culturally sensitive, but you also need to teach them how to be culturally sensitive the other way around too. It's a two-way street that you need to teach.
Yeah,
right?
100%. I remember going back to like me standing out, because I started off my student teaching at Crenshaw. It's a pretty historic inner city school in like the heart of LA, with like Crenshaw. And I walked in, this is like my first week of student teaching, and I didn't bring lunch.
Yeah.
So I went out and I went to a fish shop. I love fried fish.
Yeah.
We grew up on it because some of our friends used to work at this fried fish shop.
Like a fish and chip place?
Yeah.
Kind of like
pretty
that,
much. Just like fried catfish, you know.
Catfish,
yeah, hush
tilapia,
puppies. Yeah.
Is it Korean owned?
Yeah.
Reno.
Of course. I worked at one of those spots, dude. In Sacramento. I worked that shit for like a whole summer.
Yeah, the fish stores, hair, liquor store. I mean, like you name it. It just fits our profile. But I walked in, and this one particularly had like a seating area. Literally, everyone kind of just stopped. They just stopped eating. Like you could almost hear this. I walked in, like ding ding. I was like, oh fuck, did I come into the wrong place? Or and they didn't stop looking, you know, like normally like something happens and they'll continue their business, but they stared at me the whole way. And right there, I was like, fuck, I don't belong. But I need some fish.
Yeah.
I gotta just deal with the discomfort.
I love catfish.
Yeah.
So I went, I ordered, and I asked for like extra hot sauce, and I actually saw some like heads nod, and I was like, okay, that was like an interesting experience, but it always stood out to me because I was such an outsider, but something like some commonality like brought me like some head nods. And I don't know what that meant exactly. They're probably just like, this Chinese
he knows.
motherfucker. He got that hot sauce. But I was always an outsider. And even in my own school, where I spent like 9 years, I was the only Korean administrator.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, let me take that back. And it's like, how many Korean teachers were there? And there weren't many. There weren't even many Asian males. There were a lot more Asian females. It's a predominantly female-driven, you know, field.
Yeah.
But still, it just brings me to think like, oh shit, I'm an outsider among outsiders.
Yeah.
And it just adds another layer. But
And that makes it extra difficult because one, not only are you an outsider just because of your ethnicity, but two, because in order for them to start trusting like an authoritative figure, right? I mean, because my guess is, actually, you've told me about this. I mean, I don't know what the actual percentage is, but you said there's a pretty high turnover rate in inner city schools, right? Usually 1 year, right? And then they're like, this is too hard. I'm done. I don't want to be a part of this, right?
Yeah. I don't know about the number of years, but it's definitely, the turnover is a lot higher.
Yeah. So let's just say generally high turnover rate.
Yeah.
So you have some of these kids who might be coming from broken homes who don't really have that adult figure that brings them security and like teaches them. And it's somebody that they could depend on and rely on. And then you kind of transition into like the school system where the teachers are supposed to be playing that role as facilitators. But then if they're seeing teachers coming in and out all the time, it's like, what the fuck is even the point of me trying to like build a relationship with this person? They're not even going to be here. You know, they're not even going to care enough to stay or to care about me. So fuck this person and fuck education, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that the word that really resonates with me is when you bring up care.
Mm-hmm.
How do I demonstrate care? And then I think there's a precursor to that question is, do I really care? You know, like authentically looking.
Right. You have to genuinely like ask yourself.
Yeah. Do I really
honestly
care? Like, on what level of care do I have? You know, am I gonna donate all the time and money I have? Realistically, probably no. You know, you're gonna burn out.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like the expectation that some people see, especially beginning educators when they go into teaching. Like, oh, I can't care enough. I don't have the capacity for it. It's like, okay, well, what level of care can you provide? Okay, let's just work on that. I'm not asking you to stay until 7 p.m. you know, every night, or donate half your paycheck because you see some kids who have less than you. You know, like, let's think about what care can you provide. And I think when you start thinking about it that way, there's a whole slew of things where you could demonstrate care. You know, I think and what you're saying is, how do you become effective in the classroom? And countless, you know, just never-ending research always says it doesn't matter how much you know until they know how much you care, right? It's just like, you
That's
have
true.
to build relationships.
Right. I mean, that's the most important thing. You have to develop that human-to-human relationship first. But when you have so many barriers in between that to overcome, it almost sounds like kind of never-ending in your beginning journey to kind of chip away at that. And it sounds like the turnover rate is so high because they just burn out from trying to chip away at that.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no point to this. My heart might have been in the right place, but ultimately,
Because
it's
it
like,
seems very hard, because I don't know what that answer to that solution is, right? Because I think, like, because of the whole, you know, a lot of people are starting to think about this now because of the whole Black Lives Matter movement, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these inner city schools does have a huge, like, Black population, Latino, and even Asian population, right? And so with in these specific areas, it's like, it's hard for me to see how do you get this to be important to them, and not even so much to the students. I think it's more to the parents, right? Especially because, like, when you're fucking poor, and this is what people have to realize too, when you're fucking poor, there's so many things you have to worry about, right? Especially when it comes to, like, raising your kids. Most of the times is, does this kid have food? Does this kid have electricity and a roof over their head? So when it comes to that education process, that becomes like number 10 out of the whole list, right? And I think that's the part where I'm trying to figure out, you know, especially from, like, an educator's perspective, it's like, where's that solution, right? Like, how do you take them from that and say, hey, like, where can we alleviate something for them along this process that allows them to put education first?
Yeah.
What they do with their education is completely up to them. Because even for me, even when we were poor, right? But my parents made it an important part of my life to stress education, even if they didn't know how to get it done, right? I didn't know anything about
get your ass beat. That's
yeah, they would fuck me up, you know, scholarship,
Korean way.
yeah, or whatever. I think I got very lucky in the sense of, number one, like, I hung around, you know, nicer kids in high school later on, and they were a lot more geeky and dweeby, which kind of, you know, fuck with, like, it made more sense for me. And then I just happened to like reading books a lot. So that helped me out. But when it came to, you know, grades, I was trash. You know, it was like, I had a 2.6 GPA. It was I barely got into UCR, and UCR was just accepting everybody. They didn't give a fuck what you were. You know what I mean? Like, I got an acceptance letter to UC Merced. I didn't apply.
They just
Bro.
shit you.
When did you graduate?
I graduated 05.
Oh, okay.
I didn't
That's like when they first opened.
That's the
give or
first
take.
year they
Yeah.
opened. They're like, you got in. I was like, to where? And I had to look up what UC Merced was.
What the fuck?
And
Where
then
the fuck is Merced?
And then Sacramento State University, they were like, you got in. I was like, I didn't apply. I was like, what the fuck are these people talking about?
Yeah.
But I ended up going to Riverside anyways, which was a terrible school at the time, you know?
I think once again, like, I want to add the disclaimer. I'm not the expert. I'm
Yeah.
not as, like, well versed. And so what I see, or what I want to bring up is just, like, things that I happen to scratch the surface level on, or have you know, just experienced a little bit. But I think when you bring up, like, how do you solve that, right? And I think it becomes less of a, well, this student doesn't care. And one of my triggers is they don't care enough. Saying, no, that's bullshit, because it's your job as an educator to design an experience or an environment where they will start to care. You know, like,
Yeah.
one of those, like, if you build it, they will come. They say, well, I can't get in contact with the parents. The parents don't care. It's like, that's bullshit too, right? Because then you could design an environment or experience where parents can have, like you were saying, especially in low income areas, the capacity to care. And so I think there was something that I started learning about, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, you can't care about your social or, like, emotional health if you can't eat, if you don't have shelter.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that's where the systemic oppression, the institutionalized oppression comes in, because you have these marginalized communities with low access to healthcare, to, you know, to quality foods. There's, like, food deserts. Like, yo, where I was working is, like, I tried, like, I forgot, I didn't grocery shop. So I was trying to just go to a grocery store to pick up something. And I went to the produce section, and it was just around the block, you know. I went to the produce section, and like half the fruits were rotten. I was like, what the fuck is there? Like, are they transitioning and they're gonna bring something new?
Yeah.
And then I found out, I was like, oh, we just get like last dibs. We kind of get the bottom of the barrel because the stereotype is that people in the hood, they don't eat vegetables.
That's fucking crazy.
And you know what? And so the next day I went into my classroom, I was like, what'd you guys have for dinner? What'd you guys have for dinner? Burger King, or I had fried, veggies or whatnot. I was like, did anyone have a salad? So no one was like,
what the fuck's a salad, King?
No one said that, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh shit, they're gonna respond with this.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, salad's gross. What does it have, like ranch? So that kind of thing where like
fast food's cheap, right? I mean,
it's cheaper or it's
faster.
easier.
Yeah,
People don't have,
easier.
like access to high quality, paying jobs.
Yeah.
Or they don't have access to not only like healthcare, like physical healthcare, but mental, social healthcare. And so I think if you start building those infrastructures, like what Minneapolis is like proposing to do, in theory, I feel like we'll see some results in like 5 years where it's like, okay, we're going to see decreased crime.
Yeah.
Because people won't have to. They're happy. They're thriving. We're going to see an increase of diversity in the workplace. I mean, this is just ideal, but it also depends on how it's going to be implemented or executed, or like you were saying, like how people are going to actually be willing to change.
Yeah. How do schools get funding? Because what I heard was that schools are funded by whatever the houses around it.
Standardized testing too, right? That you guys got to hit your marks.
Yeah. So it's a complicated, really antiquated like formula that needs reform. But property tax is one of them. It's the majority of funding comes from property tax, so it's localized. And then there's federal funds. There used to be like all these different categories, like if a student was special education or an English learner or whatever, their income was this, there was all these different categories, but it really got, those categories shrank, but that's part of it. So federal funding provides money as long as it's used for that population. And then a lot of it is property tax. And then more,
because that's a scary thing, right? It's because, I mean, how do you break out of that? These are low income areas, and if they're getting it from the property tax, how do you better these schools? How do you give them the tools? This is why I see it's just so fucked up to me, right? Because I used to live in South Pass, right? And I remember I walked onto this the South Pass High School. They have this track. I was like, it's a nice community college, and they're like, this is a high school. I was like, what the fuck is this a high school? This is not a high school, right? They're like, no, this is the high school. And that's when people told me, it was like, oh, it's the property tax around the area that pays for this school, and that's why a lot of people, they pay other people to use their address just to get their kids into this specific public high school. And I was like, damn, this is such a weird thing, right? Because I don't see a solution for that. It's like, well, how do we get more funding into these schools for kids who have a thirst for knowledge, who do want to better themselves, right? Do they also have to pay somebody to get their kids into this other school? And it's just such an odd thing for me to see, because I had no idea that's how it worked. And then I found out in the South Pass, like there's like an extra tax that these homeowners have that they put more into the school.
So it's like what we were talking about with Nikhil on the last podcast, was like it's like so many things that's all interconnected. And really, I guess like the most general thing you can look at is the disparity in wealth, right? There's just such a huge gap. And then so like people in low income areas, they get priced out of everything. They get priced out of education. They get priced out of the justice system, right? Like there's so many things and factors against them for them to thrive and actually be, like a contributing member of society in a healthy and like a growing way. But yeah, it's money at the end of the day, right? That's like really the core of a lot of these problems.
Yeah, because covert racism, where it's like out in the open and it's individualized, like I call this person.
Can I bring that mic a little closer to you?
Yeah, I call this person, a racist name, a derogatory term. That's covert. That's individualized. That gets called out. In this day of social media, like, good luck getting away with that.
Yeah.
Good luck. But a covert. Sorry, I meant overt racism.
Yeah,
that's over. Yeah. But covert institutional racism, that's really at the systems level. It's still happening. And I'm still learning about this too. But that documentary 13th really brought up. There was like actual campaign strategies that was brought up during, I forget which presidential campaign. It's like, we can't call them this anymore, but here's what we'll do to still keep them down. And I think part of that is like redlining. I don't know if you guys are.
Oh yeah, where they redline neighborhoods. This is where you stay.
Yeah, and like loans weren't given out to, people of color, or like, hey, despite your income level, you're not going to live here. right? Or people who try to purchase homes, they put down an offer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's look at this name. Let's meet in person. Sorry, buddy, like you're not coming here. So I think like things like that can be addressed.
The hard part about all that stuff, though, is that no matter how many times these facts are brought up, people think it's opinion. They go, oh, well, like, for example, I saw a video where they were kind of debunking what this other video was saying when it was trying to explain what systemic racism was, right? And, you know, one of the facts that he brought up, he goes, well, redlining is illegal. It's like, that's cool. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, jackass. You know what I mean? Like,
that it's still not happening.
Exactly. That's what, and it's so hard to convince these people, right? The fact that he can make a point for point basis to debunk systemic racism, and his only argument is like, it's not supposed to happen. Whether it's not supposed to happen doesn't change the fact that it fucking did, and it still does.
Yeah.
It's so hard. That's why, like, when we have these BLM movements, right? I'm hearing a lot of the stuff. They go, racism doesn't exist anymore. They don't believe it's there
because it's not their reality. That's the
Yeah.
problem. And the thing is, they're so insulated in their beliefs and in their worldviews that they're not ever making an effort to because they don't need to.
Yeah.
They're comfortable where they're at, so that develops like a sense of complacency too. It's
Yeah.
like, I mean, I have no problems, and I don't see why these problems would exist for anybody else, because I don't. That's not my reality. That's not my issue.
It's so weird that they can't. I mean, I'll break it down like this. It's like you can't see that you have like an implicit bias when it comes to somebody's like color of their skin, when this is what you were taught since you were. I had KFC. I had food poisoning once, and I'm like, fuck KFC. You know what I mean? Like, fuck KFC for the rest of my fucking life, right?
Yeah.
I could do that with fried chicken. You could do that with a person too, easy, right?
Yeah.
If you had this negative construct of what these people are fed to you your whole life, you are going to see it that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm trying to figure, obviously my approach to changing somebody is to embarrass the fuck out of them. You know,
roast their
to roast the fucking living shit out of them. It's what works for me, you know? And I understand some people are like, I don't agree with you. And I'm like, cool, you don't have to agree with my methodology. You could do it your way. And I completely agree that you should do it with a kinder heart, just like a Jesus the Christ is saying. You know,
Jesus
if Jesus Christ, you should do that. I want to do that too, right? But I tried it for a majority of my life. I'm tired of it now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do it my fucking way. Because it's hard to kind of tell somebody something that they just refuse to see or believe, right?
Yeah.
So something very simple too. Like what's it called? This segregation. When did that end? What, 1960? Well, the Civil Rights Act happened in 1965 or something.
Mid-60s. It wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah, it wasn't.
That means like if it's like in the mid 1960s, right? That means you would be like in mid 50s, and then you would still understand what they were born during time of segregation, right? And then this is how people equate it. They go, well, during that time it stopped. I was like, when has there ever been a fucking law that was instated and everybody followed that rule? Like, every person that believed that segregation was okay, the law was enacted, and they go, you know what? You're right. I'm done with this. And they move on. We had COVID. They said, hey, put on a mask, everybody, and you have to shut your businesses down. People still opened up their businesses, right? They didn't walk around with masks. They didn't social distance. So if it works with something like that, what made you think that was that easy for people who had like this deep, dark hatred towards a specific group of people for it to disappear overnight?
Yeah,
it doesn't
such a
work that way.
deep-rooted issue, you know?
Yeah, what you're bringing up kind of makes me think about the most frustrating defense that I've come across, like in conversations. And this is with like my loved brothers, you know, even like family members, is, hey, you know what? Like, I appreciate where you're coming from. I just agree to disagree. Like, we can do that, right? You got to respect my opinion, and will agree to disagree here. I remember I saw something online. I was like, that's cool, you know, when you agree to disagree that ketchup is better for fries, you know, versus barbecue sauce. But this is a motherfucking like moral issue.
Yeah.
You can't just slide this under the rug and say,
sure.
let's agree to disagree that I think these people are oppressed and I think that they're not. That's problematic. Let's talk about it.
Or even worse, that they deserve to be oppressed.
True.
You know, or I mean, so yeah, that's like the most frustrating thing, is that you can't take a soft pass on something like this, like you said, because it's a moral issue, right? It's a human rights issue. And so, like, for me, my thing always is whatever issue it is that we're talking about, let's always start from a human being standpoint. Let's first look at it as a human being. No skin color, no background. Let's start and then from there we can progress the conversation. But let's start at a human point, because if you really are not a racist, then you'll have no problem treating it objectively. That this person is a human, this person is a human, this is what happened. Let me look at it from that lens first, objectively, and then we'll get into the details, right?
Yeah. I think it's even harder when it's like, people they're in your tribe, right? They're your peoples. They're your family or your brothers or your sisters.
Yeah.
And your closest homies. And it's hard to have these conversations because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I prioritize our friendship. We spent 20 plus years building this. I'm not trying to throw this out the window. And I can't say, you know what, your moral compass is just pointing it. Your true north doesn't align with mine. So like deuces, like I'm not going to have anything to do with you and I can't change your opinion. So farewell. It's more of like, okay, that agreed to disagree it's all right, fine. Let's do it for the sake of the friendship. And I still love hanging out with you. But when can we have these conversations? And that's something that I've been grappling with.
Yeah, I talked to actually John Ho about it recently.
Yeah.
That I was telling him the same thing that,
Who's John Ho?
he's a music producer friend, but
Yeah.
so I was just, we were just talking about what was going on, and I was telling them like there's people I know who have drastically different views on the subject than I do, and if I were to have conversations with these people, it's going to hit a stone wall really fast, really quickly. But I try to maintain the friendship to, like you said, for opportunities to progress on that front, right? To try to chip away on that front. But then his response was like, bro, at this point in my life, those people I just cut out. Like, I don't even have the time or energy for it. Because he's a new dad too, right?
Yeah. Shout out to him, man. Fuck.
Yeah. So it's like, it's more of like finding what's worth investing into and then what's not, right? And like you said, you're grappling with that now.
Yeah.
I don't grapple with shit.
Grapple with them.
I have a straightforward conversation. Like it's pretty much, well, I mean, I've been like that since I was super younger, so it's hard not to, but it is difficult though, right? It's difficult because it's uncomfortable. Like that, it's like, why even address it if it's going to make our friendship weird?
But it can get there though, like without that even being the intention.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like, I just know how I am and everything comes out of my face. So if I disagree, it's already there in my face anyways. So I might as well just say it, right? There's like something even really small. Like if I don't like somebody, like one time, I'm not sure if you were there, but there's somebody that we kind of know in between that I specifically fucking hate this guy's guts.
Okay.
Like I fucking hate him with everything that I have. Like to like the very deepest part of my ball sack. I fucking hate this guy.
I feel like your energy is like, wow. You're like raging like.
And then it's our buddy. Like he came to LA, and then we always go to a certain spot to drink, and so he's coming over and he was like, yo, this guy's gonna come, and I'm like, I fucking hate him, right? He was like, yo, he's dying laughing. He goes, yo, just try to be nice to him as possible. And the moment he comes in, he hugs me, and I'm like, I don't fucking like you, right? And so as we're sitting down there, I'm looking across from him, I'm just staring at him.
Yeah.
And then our buddy's like hitting me. He's like, hey, stop looking at him. I was like, I'll stop looking when he gets the fuck up and goes to the other table. So like he literally gets up and goes to the other table because
Like that?
dislike that guy so fucking much.
Oh, man.
He's a fucking leech, and I hope you fucking die. But
You know who you are.
You know who the fuck you are.
Leechy.
But like for example, I had a friend too. Like I say he's like a little bit, not even as a joke, he's kind of like on the spectrum a little bit, just enough where he's like a functioning human in society, but it kind of works towards his case because he's very emotionless, like so he can work very well, right? But he'll say stuff like in jokes to create shock value. So if it's counterculture to say it, he'll say it because he thinks it's funny as a joke, but he doesn't have the intent to be racist or be hurtful in anything else that he does. Like for example, after his wife had a child, this was like 6-7 years ago. His wife had a child, and he comes up and his wife tells me that he called her fat, and I was like, okay, bro, and so I had a conversation with him just because I know him, and I was like, hey, so I heard you called your wife fat. Why'd you do that? Right? He was like, well, we had a talk where we said we're going to be open and honest with each other.
So do you know you're fat?
I was like, well, hey, guy, what the fuck? And I was like, you can't do that. He was like, well, we want to keep ourselves like really open and honest. It's like, well, I think that you say stupid shit all the time. Do you see me go out here and call you stupid every fucking day? Like, come on, man. Like, you should know better. I was like, there are things that you can and can't say and things that are appropriate. She just had a child. Move on from it. Those are uncomfortable situations. Like, I don't want to have that conversation with him. But when it fucks with like some of my moral foundations as a human being, I think it actually helps the friendship in the long run. He also was somebody that made like a fried chicken joke recently, right? And he was like, well, if I go out here and I make a fried chicken joke, you think black people would be mad? And it was dead silent. And I was like, that's not funny. Right? He was like, oh, why? And I was like, look at the times. I was like, also fried chicken jokes. Everybody loves fried chicken. It's a really old racist joke. Don't do it. He goes, cool, got it. But you know, he gets a pass because he's a little on the spectrum, you know.
Well, but the thing is, if he's willing to acknowledge that, or at least try to meet halfway of like trying to understand, oh, there's a possibility that I may be wrong here, right? And I'm willing to explore that, also for the sake of the friendship, you know. But with some of these people, it seems like they're kind of drawing a hard line. You're just pushing your line further and further in the sand.
Yeah.
And you know what basically the point John was making was that I ain't got time for that shit no more. Yeah. You know, like history or not, friendship be damned. Like if our views on these core issues are so drastic from you know, one another, then I really have no point of maintaining a relationship with you.
Yeah.
And it's tricky, man. It's really tricky because like some of these people, like, you know, that they're not inherently bad people. Like their intention is, I'm going to be a fucking racist, hate a group of people, you do whatever I can to like, you know, make things harder. It's just a lot of it has to do with political agenda, right? Political affiliation. And those views really stem from that. I mean, I think that's like the biggest disparity right now when it comes to the Black Lives Matter, right? You're either extreme right or you're extreme left. It seems like there's no in between right now. You're being accused of one or the other by the other side. You know, if you're taking a more compassionate standpoint, you're being accused of being on the extreme left, right? If you're taking a more, well, I don't really see that as a problem, you're accused of being on the extreme right. So it's like, again, going back to the human being element. It's like, why the fuck does it have to automatically be a political affiliation or a political thing if I have a certain view on it? You know, what if I don't identify with a party? And this is how I feel about it anyway, because this motherfucking person is a person, is a human being, not about fucking politics, man, about life and death, about police brutality, about injustice. Like, that's what we're fucking talking about. But constantly, politics get injected into it over and over again. And that's like the point where, or that's the thing that's really fucking irritating me, is that I want to be able to have these conversations without the politics, because that's not where I'm coming from. I'm not coming from a standpoint of politics. You know, I'm, like I said, I'm coming from a standpoint of let's talk about human beings and injustices that exist and what we can do to make it better. Not just for them, but for everybody.
I mean, I think it's hard to find human beings who are really open for change, right? I'm like that too. Like when it comes to specific things, sometimes I just don't want to hear shit, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like when I was the fattest fucking person ever, right? And I didn't want to hear that shit. My dad, every time I went back to Sacramento, my dad would look at me and he goes, "You've gotten really fat." I'm like, man, fuck, you're fat. you know?
You're fat.
You know, clearly he's not fat. I'm the fat one. But, you know, I don't want to hear that shit. Even though he's like, listen, I'm worried about your health. And I'm like, dude, athlete. You know, I'm like, I'm into not. And we're having arguments about stuff that's factually there for me. Like facts, I was really fat. He would hear me breathe. He's like, dude, like we haven't gone anywhere. Like, why are you breathing so fucking hard?
He developed asthma.
Yeah, like we're just eating like, you know, like we're just having like tonyak, you know, we're just eating dinner. And my dad's just like, are you breathing so hard? And I'm like getting angry. I'm like, you're breathing hard. Because I'm breathing hard yelling at him, you know? But, you know, like I understand, like sometimes we don't want to see the flaw in ourselves, right? Because I think it makes us question everything that we did in the past. And it's a scary thought. It's like, well, I learned this the most when it came to relationships with my fiance. She would pick things at me that I didn't like about myself that I knew was wrong. But saying it out loud and admitting it to her, I would rather fucking die. You know, I would rather fucking die. Not the toilet seat thing. I'm still fighting about that. But like small things, like for example, when we would get angry, I would. We don't. I mean, this has been years since this happened, but she made a rule of, hey, no matter how angry I made you, and even though I'm wrong and I'm egging you on,
don't yell,
don't break shit.
Don't break shit.
Because that's what happened in my life.
Breaking his own phone like 3 times.
I have.
You tossed that shit.
Well, not even tossed. I was smashing in my fucking head. What the fuck? So we would like when we were first together. I think in the first 2 years we were together, I broke 4 phones because there was nothing I could. She would always do it when there's a phone in my hand. I would snap that shit in half. And I think I probably used thousands of dollars just on phones because of her. But, one of the things that we developed was like, I learned that this was a bad habit that I had because I saw my parents fight a lot. Like I've seen my mom throw shit at my dad. I see my dad just chuck shit, break doors, punch walls. And so whenever I would get angry, lo and behold, that's how I would solve my anger issues, right? So I haven't done that in like 4 years or years now. But like the last thing that I threw was this, it was a puff jacket, and that shit was the most embarrassing thing I've ever done in my life. Like, because we made the rule, like, don't. So the last thing I broke was this little cream jar of her makeup, and I didn't even chuck it. I just went like, I threw it on the floor, and it shattered, and I think it shattered in a very more aggressively than how I threw it. So I didn't think it was an issue. But she starts bawling. She goes, "I told you I don't like violence," and I was like, I didn't even throw it. Like I just dropped it on the floor, but I was like, oh, she doesn't like that type of stuff because her dad used to throw shit a lot. And so it's traumatic for her. So this was like a year or two ago. I knew that I don't throw things anymore, but she got me so fucking mad. And, she was at fault. She even admits this, but I just I had this little puff jacket, right? I was like, I just crumpled it and I threw it and it just opened up like a parachute. It was the most embarrassing thing I've ever done in my life. And then she starts laughing and cracking up. So I've learned I've learned it's hard. It was hard for me to say, hey, she goes, well, don't break things. I think it's very violent. If we have kids, I don't want our kids to think about that shit. And my initial reaction is like, well, you pissed me off. What else am I supposed to do? But that's not the proper thing to say. So, I think too, when we come from these places, it's not like I'm saying this to chastise you, right? Because I see these flaws in myself first before I see it in somebody else. I think that's where it comes from. It's like, I'm not saying like, hey, recognize your faults and then be able to have these open conversations because it's easy. I'm saying it's difficult. I know the most,
Yeah. And I think change is complicated, and it's complex and it's
sure.
never
It's a long journey.
Yeah, it's never linear either. Like you progress. No, like sometimes you're just going backwards. Like, no, we're changing, right? Yeah, for the worse, but it's going to get better. Sometimes it's like that. But I think what you're bringing up is like, there has to be that love component and like patience. And it's like your fiance, I don't know how long you guys were dating for, and I'm imagining that it took, like some time for you to progress.
Oh, he knows all the stuff. She used to piss me off. He's like, why are you with us? I don't fucking know. And I fucking love her, dude.
How many years were you guys dating?
Or we are now going on almost 6 years. Once it hits August, we'll be 6 years.
Damn, really?
That's a long time.
I know.
Holy shit.
And like crazy formative years, like in our beginning adulthood, like mid-20s to transitioning into our 30s. That's pretty intense.
Yeah, she's been around for a very long time, and I think that was like probably the biggest lesson in learning how to change. Like having somebody there that you can't. Well, I can't get rid of her, but like I won't get rid of.
Yeah.
And recognizing your personal flaws it's hard. It's so fucking difficult. It's hard to say I'm sorry. It's hard to say you're right, especially when you hate their fucking guts in the moment, right? There's like times where I look at them like, I actually hate you. Like I fucking hate you. But because I'm wrong, I say I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And like I used to do this thing back in there where I mentioned the podcast, like where I know I fuck up hella bad. And I just kind of look at the floor. Like I don't say anything. She goes, look at me. And I look like that guilty dog. I'm just like, she goes, no, look at me. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm like looking for a quarter on the floor. Yeah, but yeah, I think those uncomfortable conversations are something that we need to have, especially like in school.
Yeah.
Especially.
Yeah. No,
I mean, is that hard for you? Like if you, in your position, do you have to reprimand like teachers if not want to say reprimand, but have conversations with them?
Yeah. In school, by the way, you know what I just realized is you guys aren't sitting or leaning back on this pillow. Is that intentionally or?
That's just more.
Look at the angle of my body. I'm just like 45-degree angle. Like, fuck, man.
You can remove it.
Most, put it right. I'm like, how do you like talking straight?
Like I got this chair because it looked really cool.
Yeah.
And then
my god.
And then I figured out it's way more comfortable without the actual cushion here.
Without the cushion, it's easier to.
Yeah. Thanks for the tip, dude. I was literally like consistently sliding like this.
I was like, why is he sitting up so proper? It must be the assistant principal in him, dude.
No, but adults. Yeah. Like seriously, in schools and education, the kids aren't the problem. It's the adults. And it's not the parent, it's not outside factors as so much as in internal factors. And I think like going through administrative consequences for teachers and staff is my least favorite, portion of that job. And it sucks because we're supposed to be on the same team. And this is someone who like reports to me or I'm like their direct supervisor. And now all the trainings and tools that I used in the classroom, I still employ with teachers, because it's still the same field and it's still relevant.
Right.
So I'm prioritizing like relationships and trainings and being like their biggest cheerleaders and advocates. But when I have to like reprimand someone or write them up or take it up to like, a couple different levels or like request a transfer or even a dismissal, it's just, it kills my soul as an educator. Like I lose hope literally. And like, I failed this one educator. We couldn't prevent this from happening. But I'm often seen as I'm already the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
More so than the principal, because the principal, all the shitty things that they don't want to do, they assign to the vice principal.
Yeah.
You
Like,
deal with that shit, John.
John, there's like this really irate parent right now. And before I was like, okay, cool. Like, so what are you going to do? Like, can I learn from you? He's like, no, you're going to step in there. Just let me know how it goes. And I was like, all right. So that's how it works. But, it sucks because part of it is like, with kids, their saving grace is always like, well, they're young. They don't know. They can learn. They can get better. But when you do it with like a 60-year-old person or like 57, couple years away from retirement individual, it's like, damn.
Yeah.
There's not much I can do to, change this.
They don't
around.
give a fuck.
Yeah. Or like just thinking about 30 years of what you were doing with all these different groups of kids. It's really heavy and it's not something that I enjoy, but it's necessary.
It must be really awkward. Like if you as a young 30s talking to the 60-year-old man, it's like, let me talk to you about your behavior. It's like, what the fuck? How
Man,
fucking dare you?
bro. So like the charter world tends to have younger educators. And
Yeah.
so I think, I don't know if you asked like, how did you get into the charter world? It's because I graduated from the teaching program right when the recession hit. So budget
That
cuts
is
to
the
education.
worst time.
It's the worst time, like
Yeah.
automatically like 20-30% of the job sectors just disappeared. They vanished or anything. It may not have been that much, but even the positions that they posted, they were just being flown for internal candidates to like move them around. No one was going to get hired. But there are a lot of these charter schools in really like tough areas where they were hiring. So that was my start. And I specifically joined a program that focused on urban ed. And so it was like a seamless transition. But there were cats coming from like the OC. It's like, I did not sign up for this shit.
Oh, yeah, they probably got eaten up.
Yeah. And I had the same treatment, but it was like, at least I had at least a year of understanding or just learning this is what you're going to expect. Whereas they thought it was like, oh my God, they're going to love me. I loved school. That's why I became a teacher.
They don't give a fuck about you.
They don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
What's like something that, like a student has done to you before? Like when you first started?
Man, I mean,
Like which story?
I know.
the list is
How much
endless.
time you got, buddy?
The list is fucking endless, man. I mean, there are things that
The Jackie Chan one.
yeah, that one was the first like act of defiance or someone who pushed back where I was like, okay, this is pretty funny. Like, but this is what I should expect, until I can get better.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm very performance based where it's like, I want to keep getting better. I got to outdo my last performance. But it was in class and this kid was just cutting up and she had so many opportunities. And I'm sure the class was chaotic, but she was just the most chaotic. And so I don't know if I did this intentionally or not, but I was like, all right, you're fucking out because you seem like the leader. So I got to make an example, and then everyone else is going to fall in line. And I don't know if that's what I really thought in that split second, but looking back on it, I think that's what I did. And I said, all right, that's it. Like, student, you had chances. We did this. You need to go. You need to get out of class.
Yeah.
And just like, I ain't moving. Like, I ain't going nowhere. Like, I don't give a shit. So I was like, I don't think you heard me, right? So me thinking like I'm a thug,
Yeah.
turned around. I was like, I don't think you heard me. Like, you need to get the F or whatever I said, like, out of class. And she said, all right, da, 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 da. And I started walking away thinking like, okay, I gotta like save face or I gotta like send an email to the principal because I might be asked out for my behavior.
Yeah.
But she said something. It's like, Jackie Chan. And I was like, I turned around and was like, did you say something? What did you say? She said, I said, Jackie Chan, motherfucker. And for the rest of like that class, I was just known as Mr. Jackie Chan. And there's nothing I could do that I could escape from. And it consistently reminded me of that incident where I failed to act properly to de-escalate.
Yeah.
To figure out like, why was she distracted, all that thing. And maybe she needed a break. Maybe she should have, gone down to the principal's office. But when she came back, the opportunity to rebuild that
Was gone.
it was gone. It was gone because of the way I acted, and some people will say like, no, but you're taking too much ownership. She can't victimize her. She shouldn't have been doing that. You're absolutely right. But if I start thinking along those lines, what am I going to actually change?
I mean, and there's standards, right? You as an adult and as an educator, you have to show restraint, right? You can't get baited into like an emotional response, especially when you're kind of aware of what the situation is going to be.
Yeah, but the funny thing is too is like we're humans, we're educators.
Of course, not
should be able to
robots.
make mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I never restored that with her, and she was cool. So at the end, at the end of the year, we didn't get along, but we like saw eye to eye and we tolerated each other. But after my training, I realized, and this happened after I started receiving some of those trainings that I alluded to, was I did something similar to another student, a female student, in fact. And then like after that, I realized like female pushback is a trigger for me, especially when they like, get real like loud, or they just like, because I felt, some of my things were being threatened. But then with her, I didn't cuss at her or anything, but I raised my voice. I got really close to her, and then I intimidated her. Like, is there something you want to add? Nah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's right. And like I walked away or something like that. But like everyone sees that. Like the class was quiet. I had enough like capital, cultural and social capital where, they were able to respond. No one like treated me differently. But, I felt like shit afterwards. And so I went to her privately the next day. I pulled her out of like a different class. I was like, hey, that was totally disrespectful. Like, I can't believe I did that. And whether you forgive me or not, I'm just going to like commit to never doing that to you ever again in person. And nobody should ever do that to you.
Yeah.
And I said, with your permission, can I apologize to you in front of the whole class? And she was like, that's a little weird. It's like, you're just going to put me on blast. So no, but I got you, Mr. Kwon, like we're cool. And then, but later on, she came back and said, I talked to my parents and said, like, is that the first time an adult apologized to you? I was like, yeah, it was. Like, well, have them do it in person and see if he really means it.
Yeah.
She didn't tell me that in person, but she came back and said, you know what? I actually would like it in person. So I did. And I told everyone, and we had like honest conversations. And people were like, yo, like, Mr. Kwon, are you serious? Like, no one ever apologized to her. We're just kids.
Yeah.
But that kind of like, then that became my favorite class.
Yeah.
For the rest of the year, they're doing things like that, like really humanizes mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
And
it's holding yourself accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
That
saying
must have been so fucking hard because I wanted to be a teacher. I'd be roasting these kids. Dude. All I've been doing. I was like, damn, this motherfucker hurt my feelings every day.
Yeah, like 50% of the time, that's what I was doing. That's how I build rapport with some, and they would roast me back, and I'm like, damn, that was funny. Let me write that down. I got to tell it to my friends. That kind of thing. And there's different ways to build relationships, but when you ask like, what are some things that you have seen? There are things that have been disruptive, things that have just appalled me, or things that have just broke my heart because I realized like the chances of you changing your trajectory because of like the gangs that you're involved in, or because it like there's only so much we can do. So there's something that's popular called the 100 reps theory. It's like you might get to like the 90th or 99th rep, and you don't get to see them change or like really get to that 100th rep, but you're just hoping you planted enough seeds so that it can flourish with the next educator or the next advocate or the next person of support. But there was shit like I literally had like, well, part of me is kind of hesitating because I don't want to like perpetuate this stereotype of like inner city schools, but some of it's pretty fucking funny too. Like I had a male kid who I had a policy of I teach bell to bell. No one got to use the restroom when they were in my class. Yeah. And then it's illegal to do that. So I never put it down in policy, but I would work it around. So I was like, oh, you got to use the bathroom. Okay, for sure. You're next, but we just got to get through this activity. Let me show this video first. So I kept like stalling. And so kids after a while started saying, yo, we never get to this. Okay, let me see your restroom pass. There's no fucking names on here. I was like, no, it just happens. But we'll talk about that later. Let's get to the video, or like you got to do your partner talk first, and people were like excited, but kids don't use the restroom. Like how many times do you have to use the restroom when you have to go to the movies, but you don't? Because it's dope. You don't want to miss anything.
Oh, I'll go to the restroom just to fucking chill for a hot second.
Yeah. And then because, once kids value their experience, they don't want to like move away from it. And I think I was fortunate enough to learn how to like cultivate that. But there was this one kid who was like, yo, Mr. Kwon, I just drank like 2 Monsters. I have to go to the restroom. I was like, okay, cool. So I kept like stalling. And when I was a teacher, we taught 100-minute blocks. Those block periods.
Damn. Oh, shit.
That's a long fucking time to be sitting in the class, man. Yeah, like, fuck this shit.
This guy was like a hard, he had like a lot of street cred. Yeah. But because he behaved in class, that's actually what helped champion a lot of like the things that we're able to do. But he asked like 4 or 5 times and was like, yo, Mr. Kwon, I gotta fucking go. And I was like, all right, but we're just gonna take care of this activity first. He's like, I love you, Mr. Kwon, but I got to do this. And he took out a bottle, like one of the
Oh, and
monster he peed in my class.
That's fucking funny.
Yeah, and I was like interacting
That's
with someone.
fucking
I heard
funny.
I was like, fuck. You know, but I mean, like, those are like comical things, but I've also
That's
seen
fucking funny. It's like, well, this backfired a little bit.
yeah. And so after that, I got called into the office. I got reprimanded. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
of
did he
course.
ask you this many times? Actually, we did an informal poll of all your periods. We looked at your restroom pass and you have like no one using the restroom. We have to write you up because the parent's complaining.
Yeah.
You know, because they tried to discipline him. And I was like, don't worry about it. You don't have to. He's like, no, for the optics of things, like we're going to suspend him. I was like, no, this one's like on me. Like you can't suspend him. But the parents complained. And then that's how like it kind of just unraveled. Some
For
of
the
bureaucracy
optics,
of it
the
sucks.
optics of it.
So I'm
That's
saying, it's so hard, like to figure out. Like being a teacher isn't just like this pamphlet where you just do it. You got to figure out and navigate as you go.
well, especially in places like inner city schools or charter schools, right?
Because you don't know who's trying to fucking punk you, who's trying to lie, and you're
Right.
trying to, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, in that first situation with the girl who you got really mad at, right? Like now that with the knowledge that you have now, how would you done that differently?
Well, the hard rule that I started making was I don't yell at kids.
Yeah.
I can't, you know, because it's triggering. It's also ineffective, and like I lost the argument as soon as I raised my voice. I'm physically demonstrating that I cannot convince you guys. So I'm doing something that's just like getting loud, and it's so, you know, ineffective that I stopped doing it. And anytime I would like share some of these things like with my class. This is how I built community. I was like, this is where I'm coming from. Here are things that I will commit to, and I'm gonna honor your space. I like value your opinions. You're not like my minions, and I'm an authority figure, but I never want you to feel like I'm an authority figure. The authority figures that you may be used to in your lives. I'm not your peer, right? But I want you to understand that we are on even playing fields in this classroom of education and learning. And so some things that I would share is like, I'm never gonna yell at you. And if you see me starting to yell, call me out on it. I'd be like, yo, Mr. Kwon, why are you yelling? You said you're not gonna yell. And it happened. And I'd be like, that's a great check. Thank you for that. Let me calm down a little bit. Let me think. Why don't you guys do this activity? Yeah. I would do things. And so one of my coping mechanisms, and it still is to this day, is I get quiet now when I'm mad because I'm so scared of like blowing up. And my pops blew at me like, you know, like that. So that's like something that I learned was that I don't want to be like that, you know, and I kind of just get quiet, and then my face gets a little expressionless. But then my wife caught on to this too. She says, yeah, but you got this like vein that it starts pulsating. And I know you're pissed. Yeah. And, you know, now that the hairline's receding, like I see it more and more. So they would like point things out like that. It's like, Mr. Kwon, we know you're pissed though. We know you're quiet.
What do you expect? I'm like, I can't get mad.
I'm not mad. But then it became like, and then the training, you know, elevates to like, well, honor your emotions, you know, and like talk about it, or like just identify, yeah, I am mad, acknowledge it. Can I just get some space? I'm having a hard day. I'm trying to figure it out. But when you're real with kids, like they're so real with you. And when things like that happen,
they just want to be respected.
Yeah. And they start modeling what you do.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I had like some kid who would nonstop cuss in other classes, just be like, Ms. Kwon, I'm angry right now, you know, and I just need a little bit of space and just give me some time. You know, like that's like the ideal solution.
That's like some adult shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
Adults don't even do that.
Yeah.
Like theory points that if you model that behavior, they're going to follow.
Yeah.
They're so impressionable. But then if you model other things like losing your temper or, you know, like trying to exert authority, like I'm the teacher, how dare you? It's like, well, fuck you, I'm the student. So how dare you tell me what to do? You know? They start flipping the script on you. But yeah, so a lot of these things were like just really cool moments. And they're just other moments that broke my heart or just got me downright. The only time I actually got scared and like was fearful for my safety was I did something where you hold kids back. This was in my first year. Almost all my mistakes were like in my first year, but I held the kids back at the end of the day. My sixth period, they're cutting up. I was like, that's it. You guys got 1 minute of silence. All right, that's gonna turn to 10 minutes, 12 minutes. All right, I'm counting. If you guys don't shut up, you know, that kind of thing. You know, and you can't hold kids after school legally, but I did anyway, because I'm kind of a rule bender. And I just stood in front of the door, and this one kid just quietly kind of walked up and said, hey, Mr. Kwon, I have some friends who are going to be picking me up today. So I think they're waiting for me. It's in your best interest to just let me go. And I was like, no, you know, you got to sit down. And I like this kid. We had a relationship. I was like, you got to sit down. Everyone's part of the same thing. He's like, no, but I did all my work. And I think what you're doing is unfair because, I've been trying to like turn it around in your class. And he was. I was like, yeah, but, we ride together. We're a family. And so you got to sit with everyone. And he said, okay. Well, Mr. Kwon, they're waiting for me, but maybe next time they're waiting for you.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And then the implications of it didn't like register and I didn't react to it. I was like, ha ha ha, like, all right. The time's not going to be that much anyway. Just have a seat. And he sat down. And he was a quiet kid who had like everyone's respect. I knew he was affiliated or just banging. And he always had like the flossiest things. And so he had money. He was hustling. And no one like physically challenged him, even though he wasn't like very physically imposing. It's like, this guy is scary. And I knew that. But then for it to like actually actualize itself because I took something away from him,
Was a scary moment.
it was a scary moment. And that's the only time that I was ever fearful of anything. And he actually didn't make it. Because I keep tabs on like a lot of the students who I had relationships with. He got locked up for a pretty hefty crime. So I wrote to him, but then I think he didn't want to interact because his cousin was a little bit younger with my school. And he was just like, no, he's not responding to any of us. So he's like just in a really dark place. But he had that kind of like internal strength to do that to a teacher, like to make an overt or covert, whatever you want to call it, threat like that. But
very low key, but
like,
big.
I'm gonna fuck you up.
Right?
Or
No, for
my
sure.
homies
For
are gonna
sure.
ride on
It's
you.
like
Yeah,
it's like a cerebral
different.
attack.
When it's quiet like that, that's when I get scared. It's like,
because the threat is real.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to like yell and shout and pound his chest. It's like, I'm letting you know, you're gonna get some work done on you.
And so like I forget if it was like the next day or if it was a Friday, whatever it was in the time sequence. But I remember trying to talk to him afterwards about it. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, we're still cool. Like, you're my favorite class. And I still want to like improve and all that. But that was scary.
Yeah.
It was like, there's no boundaries for this kid.
Yeah.
That level of like
it's like, we're cool, but
don't cross me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's some thug shit, dude.
Yeah,
that's some straight up thug shit.
And it's unfortunate that he ended up getting locked up, but then that begs the question, right? In a lot of these poor communities, right? And when Nikhil was here, I asked him, how much do you think racism plays a role in the criminal justice system? And he said 100%. Like, yeah, right? And then so when you look at the people who are incarcerated, right, there tends to be a pretty clear trend. Poor and black, right? Poor and brown, right? So then how big of a role does education play, and how important is it in kids who are in those type of communities, right? To keep them out of the prison system.
Yeah, no, and it's a great question that I've really thought about over the last couple of years, at least, in my latest education or like learning. But I think school has such a critical role with like not only educators, teachers in the classroom, counselors, school psychologists, the campus security. I'm talking about everyone who works in education is an educator, because you have some sphere of influence over kids. I think there's such a crucial role in that, but I think it's so obvious to talk about that. I think it begs the question, and you have to bring into the conversation of, okay, we've asked schools to do more and more and more with less and less.
Yeah,
right. Less funding now.
Right.
Less access to trainings. You got to do more days, of instruction. You just got to do more and more and more. We have families who are becoming dual income earners. At the best case scenario, that's increasing. The single family home of one parent working, making a livable wage is like laughable now.
Yeah.
And so, okay, we're asking schools to do all this, and now teachers are counselors. Now they're, not only guidance and like emotional counselors, but like college counselors too. Now they're nurses. You're asking them to do all these different things. Where's the funding to bring that back into the classrooms? So let's move some funds, even at the local level or at the state level. Let's move some funds away from some other areas and bring it back into education. Is, I think, important to consider that other lobbyists and other groups aren't willing to talk about because they think, well, that's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. It's like, yeah, but times are different now. And
they're saying do it on as little money as possible. Like I mean, that indirectly shows you how much importance they play. Like they'll talk about it for optics of politicians talking about how important education is to this country, how important it is to build and develop the future of the country and the world. But then what are you actually doing to back that up? Where's the action?
I wonder why education is so, I mean, from a monetary sense, why it's so devalued in this country. Just because it's like such a huge foundation and a huge factor to how our young leaders are going to progress, right? Like I never truly fucking understood that shit. Just because, I mean, it's sad to say, but teachers are babysitters. Really? When mom and dad are gone, the teachers are there all the time. They're the one that has to watch them, like you said. They have to see it, like number one, like checking out their clothes, if they're getting enough food, all this other stuff. There's so many factors to being a teacher, right? That really affects this young mind. I never understood why this country devalues our educators so much. Like almost like that's what you're supposed to do kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And it's more important than that. I think if anything else, we want to talk about like defunding the police or whatnot. We'll take some of that fucking money and put it into educators.
And that's I think what's on the table for these type of discussions.
Yeah, because
right now.
let's go at it at the root of the problem. Let's start with the source. Let's fix them here before they become like these adults, right? And
preventative instead of reactive.
Right.
Yes,
exactly.
And I really, really do like after school programs. I think help. I mean, for me, I didn't really go. I had to go work in my parents' store.
Yeah,
but I know like after school programs helped a lot of people out, specifically kids in sports.
Yeah, and I think statistically studies will back that up too, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And I think the impact an individual teacher, or, you could even expand that to a group of teachers or to all teachers that can have on like individual lives. And it's so important for individuals. But I think when you're looking at like widespread change, like you guys are talking about, it has to start at systems.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is, there's the federal government, but a lot of education, because every demographic, every region is so it's different. The one size fit all, model doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so then you look at like local politicians, like what are like the bills that they're supporting? What are like the changes that they're advocating for? But everyone shies away from education because it's so fucking complicated. There's no monetary gains from it.
Yeah, only talk about it, right?
Yeah, they'll talk about we need to reform them, but they'll give you like the same couple sound bites.
Exactly.
20 years ago, it was like smaller class sizes, higher paid teachers, or
more money in education.
Yeah, more money for after school programs. And for individuals who may not have even really thought about education for 20 years.
Yeah.
The fact that it's in your brains is that it's probably,
it's just become a checkbox to these people. Like, in order to make sure I have the basics covered, this is what I need to check off.
Because when I wanted to be a teacher, right, it was obviously because of educators that I've been in high school that they affected my life. So I was like, okay, so I want to do this too. And then, my dad talked about pay. I was like, it can't be that fucking bad. But it was like in EGUSD, it was like 28K. I was like, what? I'm going to have to suck dick. This is my future. I have to suck dick for a living. Like 28,000? And they're like, well, yeah, that's your first. I was like, what does it go up to? It's like 32. I was like, I can't live off of that. How the fuck am I supposed to live off of this shit? You know what I mean? And it's so sad that the determining factor for me for not to become an educator was because of a salary. You
gotta, in order to endure that low of a salary, you really gotta have the passion behind it then. And you know what?
But you would think.
But it's also fair to say like, all right, you know what? If I get paid that much, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I mean, at least you're being honest about it and not being irresponsible. Like, well, fuck, I can't find any other job, so I'll just take this on for now.
Yeah.
Then you're not going into that with the responsibility that you're supposed to actually care about.
Yeah.
And think about.
Now I'm like starting to wonder how bad of a teacher I would have been. I feel like
get the fuck out of my class.
I feel like a kid like disrespected me, and I just like was really quiet. And I said, I'm never gonna yell at you about it. But the funny thing is, like after school, I'm gonna get a bunch of my homies. I'm gonna fuck you up, and you're not gonna even know it's me. Like I'm gonna have a fucking mask on. I'm gonna beat the shit out of you.
You're too big to be
and
that.
And then I'm gonna ask you the next day. I'm like, what happened? What happened to you?
Why do you respond? And you're like, shut up, bitch.
Yeah. It's like, who beat you up in the parking lot? Like, who was that? It was me, you son of a bitch.
Fucking brain.
There have been more instances that I would like to count, or remember, where it's because a teacher physically like did something to a student.
Oh wow.
Oh man.
Yeah. Whether there's some of them just crack me up because even in like the reprimand, like the teacher knows they fucked up. So it's like, Kwon, I just don't want to get fired. Can you just make me avoid that? Like, I'll do. Like, I know I fucked up, but can you help me out here?
It's like, what did you do? It's like, I threw him through a window. It's like, I don't know how you're gonna work around this.
Like they like whether it's a shove or like pinching their neck or grabbing their head and like, what the fuck did you say? You know, like things that is just like, because you just get so frustrated and so you react to what you're conditioned to, and it doesn't remove the behavior, but you identify that behavior and you think, okay, how can we prevent this? Let's target the behavior, not the person. But
they need like therapy or some shit, because that's so much to, especially inner city schools. Like that's what we're talking about right here.
He was telling me like in the beginning that some of his female, coworkers would be getting therapy because they were, like not sexually abused, but
Harassed.
Yeah, harassed.
Harassed.
Yeah, verbally harassed. Lot of improper, innuendos, improper, comments on the way they look, right? So there are people who get like mentally damaged from just trying to be an educator.
Yeah, and then I think districts and charter organizations they started smartening up. I think on a moral standpoint, just to prevent this from happening and making it better, but also from a financial standpoint, because they're one lawsuit away from being sued. A teacher says, "Oh, student ABC said this." Maybe the stereotype is the teacher has issues with classroom management. Maybe they're new in their career, so it gets kind of dismissed or swept under the rug. Teacher starts documenting it. They lawyer up. They say this happened. There's actual evidence of video footage.
Building like a year-long case.
Yeah. Boom. That's like $1 million lawsuit plus.
Yeah.
But it's complicated.
So like for you, what do you think it was that really guided you and helped you to persevere like those beginning years? Probably when it's the hardest. Not to say that it got easy now. I'm sure there's still a lot of challenges. And that's my second question. Like, what do you see as the biggest challenges in like inner city schools or in charter schools that are in inner city neighborhoods?
Yeah. I think to that first question, it's 100% my wife, right? She is my rock. And when I started my teaching career, she was there. You were there when I first started dating her. But one thing that kind of like started off our conversation was she was saying, "Oh, I wanted to be a teacher, and I'm not going to go down that route, but do you need help like setting up your classroom?" And it was like my first year, and I was like, all right, shit, none of my other significant others offered even to help, and we weren't even dating at the time. We're just, not friends. Well, so this
guy's like, how do I
scoundrel?
Because his wife is our homie's little sister.
I realized I just dug a trap.
It's like, how do I navigate this right now? Let me try to backtrack here.
It's like we were friends. We were just Bible study together,
We were just
there was nothing like
we're anatomy.
I just realized the start of our relationship was not on very, like noble terms. I fucked over. I didn't fuck over. I'm dating one of my closest homies' younger sister. And then when I started catching feelings for her, I went to him and I was like, yo, like there may be something that's kind of like budding with your sister. And he was like, fuck that. Like, you're not doing
immediately.
it.
Of course, I don't think so.
I think that would be the standard response.
Like you're not doing it, man. Like that's just not gonna happen. And I think he's a pretty aggressive fellow, but then he ended up saying like, please, just don't. Yeah. Like it just makes things complicated, And the additional context is that we had two mutual friends who did the same thing, and he actually gave permission. But I think
that's why.
Yeah,
that's
the friendship was forever tainted, and he was like, yo, I like 2 other friendships are like changed. I don't want that to happen. And I said, fuck that. I'm gonna do it anyway.
But it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out.
Worked out for the best case scenario.
It worked out. But I don't even know how we started talking about. How did I trap myself?
Because you said she was the inspiration.
Oh yeah, she was my bedrock. And so I never really complained about teaching or the things that I was like really struggling with my peers. Definitely not like I don't have a great relationship with my parents, but it was my wife, and she was always there. So having a good support system is, I think, critical. And then I think for some demographics, like going into the teaching field for financial reasons, it's like a failure. There's even like the comical video clip that starts off with saying like, oh, ha ha ha, you couldn't do it, so you decided to teach or something, right?
Yeah.
And Yeah, but that wasn't the case for me. Like my parents were incredibly proud that I cannot believe that you decided to be a teacher.
Oh God, not my parents, man.
Yeah, it didn't start off that way. My dad was like, "You sure you don't want to be a lawyer?" I thought, what happened to that criminal defense firm?
The exact thing my dad said. I was like, I want to be a teacher. He goes, cool. So you want to be poor?
Yeah,
That's exactly what he said.
So you want to be a
verbatim.
failure?
I was like, that was fast.
yeah. The value of education is like sacred in my family, and so that was really cool to have. And then a lot of my friends, a lot of them who were making a lot more money than I was, would still be like, we would be out at we'd be at like bars in K-Town. And then one of like when we're trying to like just meet girls or just, have fun, like, yo, and this is, oh man, you got to meet Mr. Kwon. He's a teacher and he does all these things. And I was like, yo, was that kind of like a play, just like an in to get in? He's like, nah, man, it's fucking dope that you're a teacher. And so I was like, what the fuck? I'm getting all this like street cred.
Yeah.
Like Kwon Sung Sang,
Yeah.
So like having that support system was instrumental, but other things was extending that support system into the school. And so I had a lot of like-minded peers who are still a really close group of friends, and we still meet up. We're all in different, some even moved out of education, but we're like our teacher homies. We're still connected. We have like a chat and all that. And I think what helps is the ongoing training that I received was not only like, okay, you got to be hopeful. It's not lip service. It's like, you got to be hopeful because here's the training that we provided you. Now do it. And we're so excited to see what you're going to do with it. So I always had a lot of like champions and like cheerleaders next to me. And I had a lot of mentors. I'm of the type, like if I'm not good at something, but I see someone doing it really well, I have no shame in saying like,
of course,
that shit was sick. How'd you do it?
Yeah.
Like, can I talk to you?
Yeah.
Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can I sit down with you? Or can I go with your approach? Let me break it down to like a granular level, because I thought some people were saying like, oh, the art of teaching. I was like, no, because I'm going into like, a handful of teachers' classrooms and I'm seeing something similar. I just can't, I don't know how to label it. And then I started like really reaching out for mentors who I still keep in touch with. When I have issues now or problems I can't solve, I'll reach out to like my support network and my mentors. And it just keeps you going, because it really takes a village, and I took that to heart. And so these are things that I would share with my students and say, hey, when you can't figure out that problem or you're struggling with that essay, that's why I'm asking you to create this group, of your peers. Share your numbers right now. It's like, nah, like Mr. Kwon, I'm like, hey,
I don't want to talk to this.
Yeah, share your numbers right now.
Yeah.
This is why. And they're like, oh shit, this guy's serious. So I was like,
Yeah.
Where are you from?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think our families get along.
That's
But
like
here's my number.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like the conversation that you gotta have, right? It's
Yeah.
like what street you on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So things like that, it's just like really when you have experiences like that, I feel very fortunate, because a lot of those things I couldn't control. It's just I was fortunate that these people were available, because I've had instances like even in my current role right now where I reached out to someone, it's like, hey, how'd you do that? Can I figure that out? Or, I really like that. I want to mimic it, because that's something that I think I could do. And, I want to work with you more on that. And they're just elusive.
Yeah.
It's just like, you got to wait a little bit, young buck. I don't know how many years you had in this.
Yeah.
I'm like, yo, this isn't my first year. It's my 5th year.
It's hard sometimes though, because like when I see younger people, they ask me for advice in their career path, right? They're like, oh, I want to do like comedy, and I'd be telling them, I was like, bro, I don't know. I wish I could tell you something, right? Because I'm trying to figure it out still. It's hard sometimes, right? Because sometimes when they say like, okay, well, how did you do this? And I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like I've never had the time to stop and think how, right?
Yeah.
And I just did. And so like, because it constantly evolves and changes. So I guess kind of see like maybe sometimes it's hard for people. It's like, okay, well, like if somebody asked me, well, how do you do YouTube? I would tell them, you fucking do a video and you upload it. They're like, well, what are the specifics? I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
You know what I
Figure
mean?
it out. What's your lane, right?
Yeah. I was like, just, I don't know, be passionate about something and commit to it. But sometimes people want specifics about stuff, and I was like, oh shit, I don't think I've even thought about the specifics. So, yeah.
And then you can't hold anyone against it for that approach, whatever's going on in their life situation, or just the desire to mentor or like pass on information. Like,
sure.
If you don't have it, that doesn't mean you're a sucky person.
Or not to mention, not everybody can be mentors too, right?
Yeah. Or even like you may disagree because of the Sacramento Queens jersey, but Lakers Kobe was notorious for not being a mentor in the beginning portion of his career.
Yeah.
He's like, figure this shit out. Watch me.
Yeah.
I know
And
you
he,
got some.
and he was the worst teacher ever. Just to let you know, nobody ever fucking liked him. Just to put that out there. I have Kobe right there. If you see him,
Yeah, he does.
I fucking love him. But you know, just to let you know,
it's behind. that
Lakers
one.
got to help
Oh,
by
no
some
way.
dirty referees. Just to put that out there.
Yeah,
you guys,
you did.
you guys damn well know it. It was facts.
All I know is we got chips. That's
Not we, they did. You guys fucking suck dick. All right?
So as far as like challenges go, then what do you think is like a pretty glaring challenge in the environment that you're in?
Yeah, I think like we can talk our ears off about the system.
Yeah.
And then we could also talk about like individual performances. But I think David, you brought it up. Is I don't think our society values education holistically.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I'm sure viewers will have some opinions. Is it social media? Is it like, the lure of money? Is it the education system is broken and you could succeed in other routes? 100%. And I think that's a fact.
But that's such a small minority of people.
No, and I would even venture to say that, but it's a large enough population where you can't just disregard it. It's like, well, I'm going to win the lottery. I'm going to disregard that because you have a 1 in 300 some million chance.
No, I'm talking about like high school dropouts who go on to be super successful.
Yeah.
Very small.
Someone actually questioned me on that. It was like, hey, like, John, you seem pretty motivated. We're like, what was your demographics like? Where'd you grow up? I was like, oh, I grew up in like Cerritos. I went to Whitney's, like fucking Whitney or like Shitney because they came from like Norwalk. They actually knew about it. And it was like, you were a fucking dweeb. I'm sure you had like all the access that you had. And I was like, oh, what are you like all your friends doing? And I thought back, and I think there's a certain percentage of our close group of friends who weren't successful, or they took an alternative route, or they didn't go the traditional, okay, succeed in high school, go to college, 2-year or 4-year, find a career, make money in advance. That's just like the cookie cutter way, but they found alternative means. Or if you look at their success story, they overcame obstacles that other kids see in like other disadvantaged societies, but somehow they made it and they didn't.
Yeah.
They beat the statistics.
I mean, it can be inspiring.
Yeah, and it's inspiring. So I think
it's just sometimes because these kids watch like, these young YouTube kids and they're like,
Yeah.
well, look, I was like, but do you realize how many people are on YouTube?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
like literally like 1 billion people are on YouTube and only half of a percent make a great living off of it.
Yeah.
So like your chances are not great. It's great for you to kind of leverage it and go somewhere else maybe. But the thing is like, for example, they go, well, you didn't graduate college, right? I was like, yeah, but I was in that motherfucker for 5 years, homie. But a lot of the stuff that I'm great at, the only reason why I figured out that I can do this well was because I had those experiences.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. Like, where the fuck do you think I learned how to read and fucking write? It was from school. Like, the reason why I could speak the way that I do was because of the education that I had, though. It goes hand in hand. You have to give yourself that upper hand first before you go ahead and figure out that you could throw it away. There are so many learning skills. That's why, I know I might have to go ask my fiance about this, but when we have kids, right, I want them to go to a public school really bad.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's a bigger pool of people. That's life. I don't want to be able to pick and choose everybody that they get to be
For
around.
sure.
I want them to be
For
able to
sure.
navigate through life how you're supposed to.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's like the promise of what an education can give you. Whether you choose to be a doctor or you figure out what your specific lane is through your major, at least it'll give you options to figure out why. Right. And I think a lot of people eliminate these things and they don't figure out their why first before they just toss it away. So that's why, that first year of college, they're so set on what they're going to be. I say, yo, breathe. Give it a go, try your best, and figure it out. Because what happens to a lot of people, like it did some of the people I know, they're like, I'm going to be a doctor. They say that from the day one, and they went through all this fucking education, and they did 4 years, and then like, fuck, I didn't want to be this.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I knew it too, because we're friends. I was like, I knew you couldn't do this shit, you fucking dumbass. You know what I mean? You're going to be a doctor. I wouldn't trust my life in your hands at all, you stupid son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And it turns out what their skills are, but they just chose to ignore it, and they just kind of went that path. So a lot of this stuff too, like, and education is very important. Like that.
Well, what you're saying actually just reminds me too that even within education, you get priced out. Not only is there a lack of funding, but to go to like these major universities, right? There's a pay to play model, and the most ironic thing about that is the core foundation, right? They don't get enough funding, but the ones who aren't going to make it to go on to those universities, even if they have an opportunity to, might not be able to afford it. You know? Or maybe they might get grants and scholarships and all that, living expenses, right? Maybe it's out of state, you know? So you just get priced out. And so that's like the ironic thing, because colleges make fucking major guap, right?
For sure.
They got major fucking guap. And the endowment funds that the private universities have, billions, you know? Maybe not billions, but triple digit millions. You know, some of these, like USC, I know for sure got that type of money. Billions, I'm guessing, right? And their endowment fund. So these institutions make major guap, but it's like, how do you even get there though?
Yeah.
You got to start at the basics.
Yeah, and I don't have like the specific numbers, but the cost of higher education has like
Drastically increased.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well,
and our pay hasn't increased that same amount.
The whole boomer argument of like, you know, back in my day, like it cost this much. It's like, yeah, well, that's why people can't fucking go to college now.
Yeah.
because of your ass making the policy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I fed 4 kids, went to college, got a $250K job, and bought a boat and a house. Well, 2 houses. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
I mean, education is just so fucking expensive. Like I wish just the community college route seems to be the way for a lot of people. I think it's a very smart thing to do. Community college and even state universities are a lot more affordable, because I went to UCR and I went to Sac State, and I was surprised how cheaper you know, the state university level was. I was like, holy fucking shit, it's night and day.
Yeah.
You know,
even within California, Cal State versus a UC.
Dude,
it's a pretty big difference.
Insane how it was like 20, it was like close to 20 G's to attend a university per year. And then at the state level, it was like 8,000 or 7,000. And even before, and at that time, that was a price hike, because before that, it was about 4.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's ridiculous. Like in my mind, it's like, if money's an issue, go to a state university.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like what one of the homies shared in our like chat thread, the predicted, like our anticipated cost of UCLA in like 18 years or 20 years. Like when your kid's entering college, if the rate of tuition keeps climbing at this rate. And it was fucking ridiculous. It was like $45K or like $50K a year.
Fuck
like,
that, you sucking dick for a living, dude.
I mean, even for like the average you know, income families, that's not an easy thing to swing, you know?
Yeah.
And then it's like, then you get into this cycle, this perpetual cycle of debt. That's a huge problem in this country, right? Because you're putting a price on education.
Yeah.
And so like, again, going back to just the lip service of talking about the importance of education, right? But no real action behind it, no real funding behind it, nothing fundamentally changing, right? And then so that already sets you up. So, okay, let's say you get to the university level. Now you're coming out of your college career with a debt, right? And that debt could range anywhere from like 10K to maybe like 20, 30, 40K. And then you decide to go post-grad, right? Then your debt goes up to 6 figures now. And then so like from there, you got to get a job now that's going to realistically help you pay that loan off quicker. But you're already starting behind. And so like that's the backwards thing, is like they're putting a price to pay for you to get educated.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest issue here, is like not just the funding that's necessary at, you know, elementary schools, junior high schools, and high schools, but even if you're able to get past all that, can you afford a college education? Can you afford a post?
Would you guys be okay if your kid came up to you and was like, I'm not going to go to college, like this is what I'm doing?
Yeah, because I can't knock that. Because I mean, I dropped out.
Yeah.
You know? So for me, it's like, what is it that you want to do? Because the thing is, if it's just, I don't want to study and I don't like school anymore, then no, your ass is staying in school. If you have a legitimate reason, though, like you have a passion for something.
I'm hoping my kid doesn't want to go to college. That's just expensive. It's like, Dad, I hate college. And I'm like, that's my boy right there. If he's like, I really want to go to college, I'm like, you're my least favorite child. Dude, get the fuck out of my face.
Let me buy you a PS7 at that point.
We'll give him some Reebok. Start breakdancing, bro. Like, figure it out, dude. Stop pop locking this shit. I don't know. It's just so expensive.
Yeah.
I think in America or in the United States, the education is like the great equalizer, because people have that opportunity. In some countries, halfway across the world, there's a caste system, or you don't have that chance. You wherever you're born, the luck of the draw, that's who you're gonna be.
Yeah.
What are you trying to be? Like, are you kidding me? Yeah. And I think that's pretty cool. But like you guys are saying, the cost of education just is so ridiculous. To your point, I wouldn't be mad if my kid said, I'm not going to college. And like you're saying, it's like, okay, what's the plan then? Let's map this out.
Yeah.
You're sick of this teacher, or you're just disenfranchised, you don't like learning, whatever the fuck. All right, I support you, but know this, once you're 18, I'm not supporting you anymore, so you better have a fucking plan.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, okay, fuck, I'm gonna go to trade school, and okay, let's look at those like salaries. Let's look at what you need, a livable income to live in the areas that you want or the lifestyle that you want. And I think if you start backwards planning a little bit like that, to bring some perspective, it should be helpful, because I know my parents didn't do that kind of planning with me. They didn't know how, right? They didn't have that kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
They just knew that, okay, if you get these high professions, you're going to be happy. Education is important because they come from a country that prioritizes it, and it's like, you better study or I'm going to beat your ass. But
Yeah.
do I really value education then if you're doing that? So
I value not getting the ass whooping. That's
Well, this generation has a different problem than us, right? Like this generation has like a burden of choice. Like you guys have a lot of fucking options. And I always say this is like, it's almost arguably harder for you now, because before it's like, we were talking about how when your basic needs aren't met, those are the things that are prioritized, right? It's like, I need to fill this because I need this. Well, now in this other generation that we're seeing, that they're not growing up as poor as us, so their options are huge. And so they're kind of overwhelmed. Like they're sitting there, and now because they have so many choices,
paralysis of choice.
Exactly. They sit there and they don't do anything at all, because now they're second guessing everything. It's like, well, if I go into this route, what if I want to do this? And what if I want to do that? Like our parents didn't have that. It was more like, okay, I need money. I need to feed my family. No matter what I do, this is where the ends meet is, and this is what I need to meet. Now it's like, that's not even an option. They don't even give a fuck. They're like, well, I'll figure that shit out. I have a roof over my mom and dad are paying for stuff. Now it's like, what do I want to be? That to them, they just don't do anything now. That's the thing that I'm trying to get some of young listeners to understand, is that you keep saying that, number one, it's like you don't know what to do. It's like, no, you know what you want to do. You just have too many options. That's the difference. And you're scared that you're wasting your time by choosing one route. And I keep telling people, you don't know what the fuck you're going to be until you try. That's what it is. I didn't know I was going to do a fucking podcast.
Yeah.
I didn't think that shit. I thought I was going to be, when I first started in this space, I assumed that I was going to be the biggest stand-up comic in the world. I did that shit for for a long time. And I was like, I don't really enjoy this that much. I don't enjoy doing stand-up as much as I used to. So what did I do? I switched over. I did YouTube instead. YouTube was fun. And I was like, this is great. Now I want to do food. Okay, well, food is fun too. Now I want to do a podcast. Things change. Your options change constantly. Like you don't know what you want until you actually try it. But inactivity doesn't grow anything. It literally does nothing for you.
You can't let it die inside of your mind. You have to take that first step. You have to take action and then figure out because there's no perfect plan. Like you could plan as much as you want. It's never going to go according to plan.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that's something that younger people will learn as they get older, just like we did, right? We always thought we knew better when we were younger. Like our parents would say something. It's like, nah, fuck that. I know better. Right?
You know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But then you learn through your mistakes. But the most important thing is that you commit to something and you take action. Doesn't mean that you have to stick to it for the rest of your life.
Yeah. But
there's no other way that you're going to find out whether or not that's your lane. And even from that, just from the process of you evolving as a human being, it might go into another path, right? It might diverge from there. So who knows? But if you don't do anything and you stay inactive and you're just thinking like, what should I do? What should I do? That's exactly what's going to happen. You're just going to sit there and think, what should I do? That's it.
Yeah.
That's the extent of it.
Well, that wraps up this podcast. That was fucking educational. It's really great. Fucking outed yourself out with that last piece of information too. Get a nice little knock on your door from her older brother. Oh, fuck, man. Well, do you have anything you want to plug?
No, man.
He's just an educator.
Yeah. Just doing the good deed.
Doing the good deed. He has a cookie business on the side.
Yeah. I mean, if there was anything, it'd be like, I think this BLM, that's something I've been thinking about, and I talked about with my wife, with the BLM movement, which isn't old. And the things that they're talking about is also like decades old.
Right. Civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we challenged ourselves to be like, what are we going to do to change our behaviors? What are we going to commit to doing and acting? And traditionally, it's always been time or money, right? So are you going to act and like get involved or do something? Are you going to join a group? Or are you going to, do something productive? Or are you going to donate? And I think it's we also want to learn. We added a third element to that. We want to learn more.
Yes.
So we looked at literature. We're starting to follow the channels that really that we align to, that we think that are talking the right talk, that are really smart and intelligent. And I would really challenge everyone out there to do more than just like what is going on. Like, that's a good space you got to be in, you know. But and then what? So act. I think acting is important.
For sure. And I kind of touched upon that too on a post I recently made, was that don't let anybody define what doing enough is, but do something, right? And then and start your path on your own. Like no one could tell you got to go from 0 to 100, and if you're not doing that, you're a piece of shit. Everybody's going to have their process with this, but the most important thing, just like we were talking about in terms of career or figuring out what your path is to take that first step, whatever that first step may be. And then from there, you'll figure out along the way.
Yeah.
Right.
That why part's really important.
Yeah.
To me, it's the most important part. And I think I got a little bit of backlash because I've been, I'm very vocal.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
one of the biggest thing I've been vocal about is just, that black screen, and people were like, why aren't you impressed with that? I was like, I've seen this because I grew up in a very predominantly black area. I've seen this type of activism. I've seen it so fucking often. I'm almost sick of it because it's like none of you are questioning why you are the way that you are. You are just doing it just to do it. And I was like, this is a cyclical issue. I'm not here to police people's activity in activism, right? I personally don't think I'm an activist. I'm just very passionate about this stuff because I've seen this bullshit my whole life. So that why part is very fucking important, right? Because now we have this issue of we do things for social currency, right? We do it just because other people are doing it. We've seen this already. We saw it 2 years ago with the death of Philando Castile. I've seen this already multiple times.
Yeah.
If I have to go through this again, I'm going to be a looter next time. Like I'm going to be that rioter. My patience is running fucking thin, right? I went to a protest. I went to a vigil. Next time I have to go through this again in 10 years, I'm fucking shit up. That's the point that I am. So I understand this. This is why I'm saying that why, like you mentioned, is very fucking important. That introspective part. Why do you have anti-black thoughts? Why is it that I think this way? And it doesn't have to be illicit. It doesn't have to be so in your fucking face. But especially like what I'm finding out the most, which I didn't know, was in the Asian community. How even in like churches, you know what I mean? This is a place of God where we see a lot of anti-blackness.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's sadly, pretty ingrained in a lot of Asian culture, in the Asian countries.
Even just like Asian countries where we see a darker skinned person of our own culture when we think it's terrible. Like, it's to the point where fucking people in Korea look like see-through.
Yeah.
I can see the veins in your body.
Yeah. It just kind of became the thing of like darker skin tone is inferior in some way.
I mean, it had a lot to do with the working class and the royalty
right.
around the sun.
Right. Yeah.
And I think David, what we've socially interacted more than a handful of times, mainly through Ed, and I think I want to put it out there that I'm admiring what you're doing. I respect it, and I think if it hasn't been said before, it is fucking ballsy to do so, because it takes courage to do what you're doing with your platform and the base that you developed. And my knowledge of social media and all that's not that great, but I do know what marketing and branding and all that is. And I think what you're doing is you're like you're saying, it probably started with your why, and you wanted to enact some change. And I don't want to see the same bullshit. At the same time, you may be alienating some of your base or your population or your
for sure.
Yeah, and that you're like, you know what? I don't give a fuck. Like outside of a monetary perspective, from a principle standpoint, I don't give a fuck because this is where I stand.
Yeah.
And whether they walk away, for those of you who view this, or if you disagree with anything that David says, I really think diversity makes us better.
Absolutely.
And I've actually started following like alt-right and extreme, because
you got to be exposed to that.
Yeah, I have 100% know.
That. Yeah.
And it's not like at first it's like, well, I'm gonna counter this motherfucker. Like I'm gonna know where you're coming from. Somebody loaded up, But then it became
scope this motherfucker.
Yeah, and
out
I was like,
quick.
it's such a fucking myopic, narrow viewpoint of where I'm trying to win, as opposed to like, let me just understand where they're coming from and where do we see eye to eye. Like, okay, where do we disagree? Like, can we get better and learn? And I think that's why what you're doing is just, I don't see it too often. Especially in the Asian community. So it's really
dope. I mean, when I first started doing this stuff too, like I didn't realize like how much of an oddball I was. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I was like, oh, people just speak their fucking mind. You just say whatever. You know what I mean? And then I'm also, the weird thing is, I think like the thing that I'm finding out too is that I talked about this recently where there's racism is a spectrum, and that's what we're really finding out. People think that they're not racist because they're not going out calling people the N-word, calling people chinks, calling people, or just, prejudice, not calling people, the F word, as forgot, as they say, and we're finding out that it's a spectrum. It's really deep into your ideals and what you think of these individuals as people, right? And I'm learning that right now, right? I'm learning it the most in Asian people when I see these people come out the woodwork. Especially, that's why I like this movement so much right now, because it's forcing people to have an opinion. You want to stay in the middle line as much as you want, but now you have the choice where you can't. And like I said this to somebody who I just had a conversation with, he goes, I want to be on that middle side because I can see both sides. I'm like, what's the other side? What's the other side of racism, right? And he didn't have an answer. I was like, that's why you're not allowed to be in the middle. Because if you're going to have a stance, if your stance is the middle, what is your mission statement? You don't have one. So now you have to choose. That's why you're uncomfortable. It's because you don't know why you have anti-Black sentiments. You know you don't hate Black people, but you know you feel these bad things and you don't want to talk about it. That's what I'm trying to expose right now. That's why, like, for me, people, like, they sent me this thing of, it wasn't Iggy Azalea. It was fucking... I think it was Azalea Banks. She's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And she says a lot of like anti-Black things. And they go, you should talk about this. It's like, not my position. That's somebody in Black culture. We'll let them police their own. I got to do with my community. I got to work with mine first. That's why I'm outing a lot of these Korean rappers. They're fucking trash.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that kid Owen, you're fucking hot garbage. And I literally told him, if I see you, I will slap you on fucking sight. You know what I mean?
It's like, let's be peaceful, but I'm gonna fucking
I will slap you on sight. And the reason why was somebody like
Just don't
that.
throw or break your phone.
Yeah, I'm not gonna break my phone. He ain't fucking worth it, but I'll slap the fucking shit out of the kid. And for me, and I always talk about this too, I'm very, very highly perceptive of who I am now as an adult, and I know who I am is because of two specific cultures. My Korean upbringing, I wasn't born in this country. And then also the Black American hip hop culture that's kind of molded who I am. For me to not give credit to that and to not denounce that makes me a fucking Chauncey ass bitch. So I refuse to be that person. And if you're that person too, where you took from this culture and they're just asking like, yo, can you back me up? They're asking, and then you go, none of my business. Fuck you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I have an issue with.
Yeah.
It's like, it's very, you're a bitch. Like, what a bitch.
For sure, that's what it is. That's a better word. There you go. It is. It definitely is cowardice and pathetic. But I think also too to note is that sometimes these people just have that disconnect in that fundamental thought of recognizing that I'm taking from this culture. They just think it's just status quo. They don't really take it a step further of actually recognizing that's Black culture. And that's ingrained in your life. They're just thinking it's just culture. Like, it's not Black culture, that's pop culture. But yes, it's pop culture, but it came from Black culture, right? It got popularized into pop culture, but that's not the origin, It came from something. That's what I'm saying. Some people don't take that next step and they don't recognize that. So they're just thinking, what am I doing wrong? Like, why are people attacking me because I like hip hop music
I can see that,
I like the way to buy certain brands or talk a certain, because they don't. And so ignorance is always the biggest problem. There are inherent racists for sure, like who are on the extreme end of that spectrum that you're talking about. But then there are the ones I feel like kind of in between where it's more of ignorance than racism, right? Rather than being on the low end of racism, they're kind of on the high end of ignorance of like not recognizing, you got to understand you're taking from that. And that's why people are calling you
So you're
out.
the compassionate side. I am fire and brimstone.
Slap you on sight, motherfucker.
It's hard for me. It's like, because I've done that route now, and now I'm on the fed up side.
I know.
And I think both are equally effective, right? It just depends on who you're talking to, who has like an open mind.
For sure.
I think some people don't, and that's where I come in with the fist of fury.
Falcon punch.
And then they're like, and then what I want to do is like, if you made a profit off of this, right? And then you're sitting there and you're mocking this movement, I'll make sure you don't make a fucking single cent, and then you'll see how much this culture has affected your lifestyle. There's another kid who wasn't Owen, but I forgot his fucking name. He's a fucking Tushik. And this fucking little Tushik motherfucker, he wrote it was New Wave Matters, which is his new EP that dropped. He goes, I don't really care about the social aspect of BLM. I just want you guys to check out my album. I'm like, how fucking socially irresponsible is that shit? And I flamed him, and this kid just wrote back. He just wrote comedian to me, and I was like, you probably don't even speak English, and I just wrote clown right back to him. And I also told him, if I see you, I'll fuck you up. But everybody has a different route, and may God be with you. Praise
Round it out to God.
Yeah, praise Jesus. You have a lot of anger, and Jesus is the way in the blood of Jesus Christ that will wash all of your sins.
Every day.
Well, guys, you guys can catch the Genius Brain podcast on every audio platform out there. You guys know we're here every Thursday and Sundays, here to entertain you on your commute or whatever the fuck you're doing. #1 podcast. Everybody else sucks. All right, guys, we'll see y'all next time. Peace.
All right, peace.